Welcome to Quiet Scare, where horror doesn't scream, it whispers, real documented experiences, thoughtfully adapted into literary horror narration for sophisticated listeners. The promise is simple, documentary truth preserved, atmosphere enhanced, a calm voice guiding the dark, without gore or jump scares. Please like and subscribe and tap the bell for new episodes. There are no more than 3 ads in the first 15 minutes. After that, uninterrupted listening, curated accounts, elevated with careful storytelling for nights when quiet dread is the point. Sleep well and dream dark. I noticed the handprint the first morning I showered in the new place. I wiped the mirror with a towel. The fog cleared in a messy oval. In the corner above eye level, a small handprint popped out in clean glass. 5 splayed fingers. It sat too high for a kid. Too high for me, unless I stood on the tub. I blamed the last tenant and shut the light off. The fan rattled. The towel rack was loose. The vibe was old wiring, not haunted. The lease said quiet building. It was a 3rd floor walk-up in Somerville, a block off Highland Ave. The stairs leaned, and the hall timer light clicked off fast, which felt personal. The landlord, Mark, smiled with his mouth only. He had keys that jingled like a janitor, and talked about the boiler like it owed him money. I paid first, last, and a security deposit that hurt. I told myself the mirror thing would scrub out. I bought a new bottle of glass cleaner. 2 actually, because the hardware store had a buy one get one, and it felt like winning at something I could afford. I hate promotions that make me do math before coffee. I sprayed the mirror until it dripped. The smell cut through the steam. I wiped with a new microfiber cloth that I did not need but bought anyway, because the package promised 0 streaks forever. The handprint vanished under blue foam. I dried the surface. Clean, empty, fine. The next morning, the glass fogged and the same small handprint appeared in the same spot. High, clear, every finger matched. The space between ring finger and pinky had a tiny nick in it like a shallow notch. I pressed my own hand next to it, palm flat. My print looked wide and long and normal. The small print met a part of the mirror where I could not reach without standing on the tub. I stood on the tub. I checked the paint edge along the mirror for greasy spots. I ran my fingers along the metal clips that held the sheet. Nothing. I opened the window to vent the room and stared at the print until the fog thinned and the glass cleared. The print faded last, as if it had been etched. I cleaned again that night. Cleaner, hot water, even vinegar, because the internet swore by it. The mirror shone. My clothes smelled like a salad. On the 3rd morning, the handprint came back. Same spot, same notch. I stopped showering in the morning before work. I showered at night and left the fan running after. I taped the light switch up. I put a space heater in there to keep the air dry. The bathroom stayed warm and stale. On the next morning, I dared to breathe on the glass. I huffed once across the center. A gray cloud spread. The print bloomed at the top corner as if my warm breath had pulled it out. I stepped back. I left the room. I shut the door. I called the landlord and said the mirror had a flaw. He said mirrors do that sometimes, and asked if the hot water worked. I said yes. He said he could swap the mirror when he had time. I said it would be good to take it down and clean behind it. He said fine, end of week. He made a note. I heard the scratch of pen. I bought painter's tape and paper towels. I taped a sheet of white printer paper over the corner of the mirror where the print showed. I waited. The next morning, the paper was wet at the edges from condensation. The center stayed dry. When I peeled it off, the glass beneath had the same handprint. It sat under the area I had covered like the glass remembered. That day at work, I stared at spreadsheets and said I felt under the weather. My boss nodded in a human way but let his eyes land fast on the unfinished numbers. I finished them on time. I ate lunch at my desk. The office microwave turned my leftovers into a gray rectangle that had no business being that color. I told myself the mirror was a coincidence and that I should go to the gym. Instead, I went home and stood in my bathroom and watched my own breath turn the room into a soft cloud and show me a small hand. On Saturday, I took the mirror down. The glass was heavy and too big for the counter. I slid it onto a bath towel on the floor. The wall behind it had faint circles where screws had been moved and new holes had been drilled. The paint color changed 2 inches in from the edges. It smelled like dust. I ran my hand across the wall. My fingers came away clean. No marks, no oil, nothing raised. I cleaned the mirror on both sides. I cleaned the wall. I rehung the mirror and tightened the screws. I showered, then opened the window and let the cold air blow the steam out. The mirror fogged, then cleared. I held my breath. The handprint appeared high at the edge of the glass. I sat on the shut toilet and watched until it faded. I did not move for a long time. The fan motor whined. A drip from the shower head hit the tub every few seconds. My hands shook a little from the heat or from something else. I put them under cold water. The sound steadied me. On Sunday, I reached for the handprint with a folded towel. My shoulder bumped the shower rod. The curtain hooks rattled. I pressed the towel to the spot even though I could not see it through the fog. I rubbed. I stepped down. The print was smeared but not gone. It remade itself as the fog shifted. I decided to document it. I stood my phone on the windowsill. I shot a short video. The glass fogged. The print came up. The shot framed my sink and part of my face as a blur. I saved it. I watched it once. I watched it again at half speed. There it was, the long, slow rise of a small hand that had been there the whole time, waiting for breath. I texted Mark the video. He left me on read for an hour, then called. He said he had a tenant in 2012 who said something similar and that they moved, and that sometimes old places hold on to things like smoke and grease, and that it is no one's fault. He said he could replace the mirror on Monday, and that he did not want this to become an issue. He sounded tired in a way that had nothing to do with me. I slept badly. I dreamed that someone stood in the doorway, small and still. I woke up and the doorway was empty and the hall was dark. The timer light downstairs clicked off. Someone walked in the unit above me. Pipes ticked in the wall. All of this had names and labels. That helped. In the morning, I showered with the bathroom door open to keep the fog down. The mirror still hazed. The handprint still lifted out and waited at the top edge. I said out loud that I would be leaving soon. My voice sounded flat in the tile. On Monday afternoon, Mark came with a flat box and a level. He took the old mirror down and set it against the hallway wall. He washed his hands at my sink and dried them on his jeans. He lifted the new mirror and centered it. He tightened the clips and asked me to check. The edge sat even with the tile line. He said that looked right. I ran the hot water. The mirror fogged. The small handprint appeared high at the right side. The notch between ring finger and pinky plain as ever. Mark saw it, he said huh, in a voice that meant he would call a glass place and ask about manufacturing residue. He did not look at me. I asked him straight if anything had happened in the apartment. He said that there had been a family in the late 2000s. He said their youngest passed away in a hospital the fall before they moved out. He kept his mouth still when he said it. He did not use the child's name. He said the mother left a little hand soap holder on the sink when they left, shaped like a bear. He said he threw it out not because of what it was, but because it had cracked. He said he did not know what else to say. He packed his level. He said to keep him posted. He left the old mirror in the hall and said he would take it down to the basement later. His keys jingled down the stairs until the hall light clicked off. That night, I didn't run the fan. I didn't open the window. I showered and stood there and watched the fog hold the room in place. The print was up there where a small person would have to reach. I didn't know why it kept showing. It did. That was the fact. A week passed like that. Every morning I checked and said nothing, and did nothing more than what I had already done. I worked. I ate. I wrote a notice to terminate my tenancy at the end of the month. I printed it and signed it and put it in an envelope. I walked it to the mailbox on Highland, the one near the bus stop. I slid it in and stepped back. After I gave notice, I slept a little better. The steps upstairs bothered me less. The kitchen light hummed, and I changed the bulb. I kept a towel on the bathroom floor so my feet would not skid on wet tile. I kept the door open. I made my coffee in the same mug. The mirror did what it did. 2 days before I moved, I stood on the tub again and reached up. I held my hand next to the small print and did not touch the glass. My palm hung in the warm air. I could see the notch between ring finger and pinky. I could see where my own hand did not match and never would. The fog edged toward the clear area where my hand would have been if I had pressed it flat. I stepped down. I turned off the water. I left the room. On the last morning, the bathroom felt colder. I had packed most of the kitchen and taped the boxes in simple X shapes. The handprint was there. The fan made the high whine it always made. The apartment had its own small sounds, and I knew them now. I wiped the counter one last time. I left the key on the hook by the door. I moved out on a Tuesday. The movers complained about the stairs and angled the couch around the landing. The hall timer light clicked off fast, because that was what it did. I carried the last box down myself because I did not want anyone else to drop it. I did not go back up. I took an apartment across the river. New paint, laminated counters, a mirror with rounded corners. The first night there, I showered and watched the fog rolling clear. The glass showed my face and nothing else. I stood there long enough that the air got cold and the edges dried to little clear islands. I turned off the water. I keep my bathroom door open now. When I shower, I keep a towel near the sink and a dry cloth under the mirror. I do not wait to breathe on the glass. I clean it and go make coffee. I do not check corners. I do not stand on a tub. I still pass Highland Ave on the bus sometimes. The building sits there with its brick front and the same cracked stone step. There is a mailbox on the corner that takes letters and does not give anything back. I look out the window and then look away. I did not believe in the legend until I had to hit the brakes. It was a little past 2 in the morning, the stretch of night when the highway goes hollow. I was coming back toward Chicago after a late run, trying to shave time by cutting along Old Archer Road, where the fields push up against the last skin of suburbs. The sky was clear and cold. The road was dry. No other cars. My phone sat face down in the cup holder and the radio was off, which I told myself was to help me stay alert. It also saved me from the talk show guy who thinks midnight is for yelling about potholes. Up ahead in the wash of my high beams, a figure stood in the grass beyond the shoulder. I eased off the gas and watched the shape hold steady. Small frame, narrow waist, a skirt that hung to the shins. The dress was plain and old-fashioned in a way you clock even if you don't know sewing terms. Long sleeves, no jacket. I rolled to a stop opposite the figure. The engine idled. The heater hummed through the vents. She stood there in the open like a post. She did not turn or lift a hand. She looked straight out over the field, not at me, not at the road, like her eyes were fixed on a line past the fence. I cracked the window. Cold air clipped my cheek. "You okay?" I asked. Nothing. She did not flinch, and that would have been fine for a shy kid, if not for the next thing I noticed. The cottonwoods behind her moved. The grass rippled at her shins. The hem of her dress did not lift. It hung perfect and still while everything else took the breeze. I put the car in park and reached for my phone. My plan was basic. Take a picture, call it in if needed. The camera caught a bright fan of light and a pale smear that could have been anything. I took another. The focus stuttered and the screen locked for a second, which is exactly what you want when your heart bumps up a notch and your hands are not steady. Technology is very brave when you do not need it, and shy when you do. I called out again, louder. "Do you need help?" No answer. No shift in the shoulders or angle of the head. From where I sat, I could not get features. I made out an oval of a face turned away from me. If she had hair, it was short or pulled tight. No phone glow in her hands. No bag. No reflective strip anywhere, which hit me the wrong way because kids wear reflective strips to be seen, and whoever dressed her hadn't thought of that. I opened the door and planted a foot on the gravel shoulder. My knee locked. I did not want to step into that field. I told myself it was because it was private property, and because I've rolled my ankle before and I am not on a first-name basis with my deductible. I shut the door and sat back with both hands on the wheel. The hazard lights ticked on and off, painting the darkness behind me. I edged forward 10 feet and angled the beams to catch her straight on. White light washed her, She held her place, arms at her sides, chin soft. The dress hung as if it had weight. The wind pressed the grass, let it up, pressed it again. The dress stayed straight. The dash clock nudged a minute. The engine heat gathered around my legs. I looked in the rear view. She stood in the frame of the back glass, small and fixed. My eyes watered. I blinked hard and checked again. Same frame, same line of shoulder. The cold pushed through the crack in the window and licked my ear. The air smelled like frost and cut weeds. I put it in drive and rolled ahead. I told myself I would pull into the next turnout and call the non-emergency line. I told myself she would be gone when a car came. I told myself not to add to the pile if this was a known thing the locals had already flagged. I did not like the decision, but I made it. The road slid under the tires. The fields fell back. The first low glow of the city lifted ahead of me and made the windshield a little gold. At home, I went through the routine. Keys in the bowl, shoes lined up, fridge open. I didn't want food. I wanted to look at the pictures. I opened them and found 2 screens of flare and grain. Each one could have been a ghost or a piece of dust. My thumb hovered over delete. I set the phone down and opened a browser instead. I typed Old Archer Road and the name of the nearest intersection and added the word sightings. I got a mix of old local news clippings and forum posts, the kind with screen names from 10 years ago that never changed. A newspaper piece from the 70s used the phrase repeated sightings to talk about a young figure in a dress who stands in the open fields at night, immune to rain and wind, facing away from the road. The article was short and sure. A newer blog folded it into a longer legend tied to those fields. The details moved around, but the spine held. A girl. A simple dress from another era. She stands there, she does not engage. I lay down on the couch and watched the ceiling turn gray toward morning. I ran through the mundane list. Runaway? A kid waiting for a ride gone wrong? Someone's mannequin prank? It would be the kind of prank that requires a person who never blinks. I set an alarm for 7 and closed my eyes for 20 minutes. When the alarm hit, I turned it off and stared at the wall. By late afternoon, I had convinced myself to take the same road again. If she was a kid, I did not want to leave her out there. If she was not, I needed to know that too. I did the rest of my run and shaped the timing so I'd hit the fields just after 2. The sky was clear again. The road was empty. The cottonwood stood at the bend like always. I killed the radio and listened to the heater feed warm air at my ankles. I told myself I would not stop unless she was on the shoulder or in the road. She was there, set back in the grass about the same spot as before. Same dress, same long sleeves, same hem. Neat and still while the grass brushed it and fell off. I slowed but did not stop. The beam slid across her profile. Her head was turned toward the field. The face was a pale oval with no detail I could trust from the driver's seat. I passed at 20 miles an hour and the car carried me on. At home, I went back to the articles and read deeper. People had tried to document her. The videos all looked the same. White flare, fixed shape, the low voice of the recorder pretending not to be nervous. The comments lined up on the usual sides. The locals made short notes and got on with their night. The rest argued. The details that mattered to me repeated in a short list. She stands in the open. She does not respond. The weather does not touch her. You have to be alone or near it. It happens late night or early morning. I called the non-emergency line and gave the location as best I could. I said there was a young person standing near the road in an old dress. The dispatcher took my name and the mile marker. She asked if the subject was in the roadway. I said no. She said they would send a car. Her tone made me think this was not a new call. I thanked her and hung up. After that, I avoided Old Archer at night. I could afford the tolls and the extra 5 minutes. The interstate carries noise, and noise felt like a safe choice. I kept to that for 2 weeks. On the 15th night, the city put up detour signs for overnight resurfacing. The orange arrows pushed me back off the interstate and across the quiet streets toward the edge where the fields begin. I told myself it would be fine. I told myself she would not be there every night. I kept my eyes on the right lane line and watched the bend open up. The high beams painted the ditch and the grass. She stood where the shoulder widens, exactly where your lights land if you're looking straight ahead. I did not slow. The car passed. The heater blew warm air. My hand stayed at 10 and 2. I drove through the cut and out the other side, and did not look in the rear view until I hit the next rise. In daylight on a Sunday, I went out there with coffee in a paper cup and walked to the ditch where I'd stopped. The grass had bent patches where other people had stepped in and stepped back. No clear prints, no dropped items, no torn fabric. The fence wires were tight and uncut. I took a picture of the empty field and it looked like a field. A few cars went by and none of them slowed. The sun warmed my neck and did nothing to lift the corner of my stomach that had been down since the first night. I don't have an explanation. The old clippings call it a legend, and the forums say it has always been there. I can tell you only what I saw. A young figure in an era-specific dress stood in the open field beside a rural road outside the city. She did not move and did not seem to take the weather. When I drove alone late at night along that road, I saw her more than once. Afterward, I found articles and posts that matched what I had seen, and the match surprised me in a way that stuck. My behavior changed in small ways. I look for detours now and go out of my way to keep to the interstate after dark. If the resurfacing crews push me back to Old Archer, I stay at the speed limit and do not slow down for the shoulder. When people ask, I give them the location and tell them to read the old reports. I do not make it into a campfire story or a warning. I leave it plain. I didn't know why she was there then. I don't know now. I know the field can hold one shape for a long time while you pass by alone at 2 in the morning. The first time the dog went for the empty air, I was eating toast at the kitchen counter, and my dad was at the sink. Daisy's head snapped toward the doorway to the hall. Her hackles rose in a straight stripe. Her teeth showed. She lunged and barked like someone stood there with a stick. Nothing stood there. The hall was bare wood and a mirror we hadn't hung yet. My dad told me it was a squirrel outside. He said it with the voice he used when the disposal jammed. Then he ran the faucet to rinse a cup and the handle shuddered under his hand. He frowned and messed with the knob like it had embarrassed him. We had moved into the house on Cotton Mill Road because it was new, and my parents said new meant fewer surprises. The subdivision had a name with bluffs in it, even though the land was flat and smelled like old clay. I was 14 and had a small bedroom over the garage with a window that faced a line of half-finished houses. I liked watching the crews in the morning. The foreman would wave at me with his coffee if he saw the curtain move, which made me feel like I had a job too. On day 3, the upstairs bathroom faucet turned itself on at 2 in the morning while I was finishing geometry. I stood in the doorway and watched the water run steady, as if a hand held the handle over. I shut it off. I went back to my desk. It started again 5 minutes later. I shut it off and tightened it hard. My dad came up the stairs and asked why I was up. I said the sink was broken. He said welcome to home ownership, which was not my favorite club. We kept a notebook for house stuff because the builder's office liked details. My mom put the dog entry in with the date and time and wrote Daisy reacted to nothing in hall. She put the faucet thing down too. There is a tone adults use when they're pretending something is fine while documenting it in a formal way for later confrontation. She had it down. The next morning I asked my dad if he could call the builder. He said he'd call, and I believed him, but I also wrote the number on a sticky note in my backpack, because the last time my dad called he forgot to hit send on a text for 2 days. I'm good at polite follow-up. It's my secret superpower, which is also the most boring superpower. The dog kept locking onto corners. She would stand in the dining room and bark at the exact space where 2 walls met the ceiling. It wasn't every day. It was random enough to feel like forgetting a word you use all the time. And then the blankness makes you angry. My dad would walk up to the corner and stand under it with his hands on his hips, like he could make it stop by being practical at it. On the first Saturday, my mom's friend Cara came to help unpack. She used to work as a housekeeper and still moves through rooms like she's got an order to follow. She wiped down the bathroom mirrors and found water on the counter that beaded in a curve around the base of the faucet. She looked at the ceiling vent. She ran the fan. She said to my mom that the fixtures were cheap. Then Daisy barked at the hall again and Cara's face tightened in a way I noticed without meaning to. That night the master bathroom shower turned on at 3 and stayed on until my dad stomped down the hall and shut it off hard enough that the pipes thumped. The next night, all the taps in the house did a relay from midnight to dawn. Kitchen, laundry, upstairs bath. The laundry faucet went on at 1:11. I only remember that because the stove clock was blinking from when someone had unplugged it moving a box. My dad called a plumber Monday at lunch. I sat at the counter with the notebook and read the dates while he spoke. The plumber, a guy named Adrian with a sunburned neck and a tape measure clipped to his belt, climbed around under sinks and in the crawl space. He said the water pressure was normal. He said the valves were fine, but the handles were loose where the set screws met the stems. He tightened everything and said to call if it happened again. He gave my dad a magnet with his number, which my mom put on the fridge near the pizza place and the vet. That night the water stayed off. Daisy slept on the rug beside my bed and snored the way she always had. I dreamed about walking through the house turning off taps, and I woke up with the sound still going. It was coming from the guest bath. I stepped into the hall and stopped because the voice came before the water. It was a woman. She said my dad's name from the dark downstairs. Once, like she was reminding him of something he had promised to do. My mom woke up because I froze, and made the kind of sound you make when you almost step on a cat. My dad asked what. The voice said his name again. It was my mom's voice, but it came from the front room, and my mom was behind me in a robe. I went down the stairs and walked through the living room and into the kitchen, because this was our house and the lights worked and I was going to make the floor real under my feet. There was nobody in the kitchen. The sink was on full. I shut it off and the handle clicked under my palm. I didn't say anything. Neither did my dad when he rounded the corner and scanned the windows like someone would be standing on the porch. He slept on the couch after that, with the TV on low. He said the sound helped him fall asleep. My mom said we were all tired and that houses made noises. She said it like a truth you stand near because your daughter is watching you choose. Daisy spent the next morning stalking the hallway and growling with her head lowered. She stopped dead at the door to the office and wouldn't cross. If I pushed her collar, she planted her feet. When I stepped in, she barked and lunged toward the far wall again. My dad kept saying enough, like the word could be a wall too. I understood that enough was for himself as much as for the dog. By the end of that week, my dad started hearing the voice in the afternoon. When he came home from work, he would set down his keys on the entry table and stand still waiting. He said it was my mom, from the back of the house, or sometimes the upstairs, but the house held his name with a shape that wasn't hers. It made him pale in a way that showed under his beard. We filed a warranty claim for the plumbing. The builder sent a surveyor to check for slab issues. The man, older, careful with his clipboard, walked the perimeter and rapped the baseboards with his knuckles. He put a level on the kitchen floor. He said new concrete can make pipes thud, then asked about the water turning on by itself. My mom said yes. He said he'd note it. He wrote it in small letters. The water kept going on and off all night. The voice called my dad's name from rooms where no one stood. Daisy attacked corners and doorways with a single-mindedness I had never seen. We stopped laughing about moving and started using quiet like a tool. I learned the sound of my mom crying in the shower with the fan on. I learned how to carry the laundry basket without looking into the dark rooms. When the builder finally scheduled a follow-up, they sent a crew to dig a trench along the back wall of the house to check the foundation drains. It was a Tuesday in August, with heat coming up off the dry dirt. I stood with a glass of water on the patio and watched two guys in neon shirts dig. The shovel hit something that wasn't dirt. The sound had a blunt quality that made one of the men say, "Huh," and drop to his knees. He brushed away soil with his glove, and then with his hands. It was a piece of stone with a beveled edge. There was a letter on it. He stopped brushing like his own name had appeared on a test he hadn't studied for. The other guy said it was a marker. The foreman came around from the front where he had been on the phone and crouched beside the hole. He looked at me and then at the stone. He looked older than he had an hour before. He called his boss, and then he called someone else. People who know what to do have a different way of dialing. They widened the trench with caution. Under the stone was a tangle of roots and clay, and then the edge of a second stone broken. Under that, fragmented pieces of something pale and curved. The men did not touch those. They stayed back and kept their tools on the grass, with the handles pointed away like guns on a table. The foreman called the police, and the dispatcher sent a car. The officer stood on the patio with my dad and asked if we had any old maps or history for the lot. My dad said no. The officer called it a possible burial site in the calm tone officers use when they name the thing that is happening without telling you how to feel. They circled the trench with tape from the trunk of the cruiser. The tape looked wrong out there beside our folded lawn chairs and the bag of charcoal. By that night, the kitchen sink stayed off. The laundry stayed quiet. Daisy curled on the rug and watched the hall with her head flat on her paws. No faucet moved. No voice said my dad's name. The quiet felt like the first day after a fever breaks. The next morning, a small group from the county came out with clipboards and soft voices. A woman introduced herself to my mom and explained that sometimes developments go up where there were small family plots, and sometimes stones get pushed aside, and sometimes records are bad. She said they were going to bring a specialist to handle remains. She asked us to stay out of the back rooms for the day. My mom nodded like a person has to pick a job to do, and she picked nodding. The specialist arrived with a box of tools wrapped in clean cloth. He stood at the trench with a seriousness that made the yard feel like a different place. He brushed and moved and wrapped. He placed each piece into a lined container. He did not say much. My mom stood by the sliding door with her hand on the frame, and I stood beside her and looked at the man's hands, so I didn't have to look at what he held. They brought up more broken headstones. One had a date. It was from a century before I was born. The names were worn down until they were almost erased. The specialist lifted each fragment like it had weight beyond the material. He did it in the steady way of someone who knows the value of pace. The county woman said the remains would be moved to a proper place. She used the word respectfully, and it didn't feel like a slogan. It felt like a task with steps. That night, the house stayed empty of voices. The water stayed off. Daisy slept. My dad slept in the bed instead of the couch, and he slept without turning the TV on. We kept the hallway light on anyway, not for seeing, but as a mark of what we had done, and what we were not going to pretend away. In the following week, the county returned to finish the excavation and document the stones they found. A man from the builder's office came with a folder and a mouth set in a line. He apologized without using the word fault. He said the homes along our side were built on land that used to be part of a small cemetery that had fallen out of use. He said they had relied on the records they had. He said that once the remains were reinterred, everything would be made right. He did not look at the trench while he said it. The plumber came back too. Adrian looked at the set screws he had tightened and said they were as tight as he had left them. He shrugged with one shoulder and said sometimes water acts up in a new house. Then he went out to his truck and came back with a little charm thing that made Daisy lick his hand and sit square in front of him, like he had brought a treat. He knelt and told her she was a good girl. He said it out loud in the simple way that doesn't need belief to work. When the county finished their work and the remains were moved, they held a simple service at a quiet plot outside of town. My parents went. I stayed home with Daisy and walked her around the block. She stopped by the construction dumpster at the house next door and sniffed the ground. She didn't bark. When we went back inside, I turned on the kitchen sink to rinse a cup and turned it off, and the handle sat under my hand with a clean stop. The voice never came again. The water stayed in its place. Daisy went back to barking at birds and the mailman, and anything with wheels and no engine. My dad put the notebook away in a drawer. We left the county business card on the fridge. We live in the house still. I close the upstairs bathroom door at night out of habit, and when I hear the pipes settle, I picture Adrian telling me about set screws and air in the lines. I don't know why any of it started the way it did. I know what made it stop the way it did. I know what made it stop. I keep my room neat now, and I water the fern on the windowsill on Tuesdays. I don't put boxes or laundry baskets in the hallway anymore. When I pass the spot in the office where Daisy refused to go, I glance in as I walk by and keep my eyes on the floor. I'm not looking for anything. I just don't step there. After school, the farmhouse felt too large. The stone held the day's heat, and the hallway outside the main room carried every small sound. I was supposed to keep an eye on my little brother. We drifted into the corridor anyway, touching the walls, counting scuffs, killing time until dinner. A boy stood there. My age, almost my height, but wrong the way a photo is when it's printed slightly out of register. He wasn't in our family. He wasn't a friend from school. He looked like he belonged to the house. Before I could call for Mom, every light went off down the hall in quick snaps, each bulb surrendering. Kitchen first, then the overhead in the main room, then our corridor, the back door shut and locked. The sound carried, metal into metal, no mistaking it. My brother pressed against me. "Did you see that?" I kept my eyes on the boy. He didn't move. Something else did. The air seemed to set itself to his choice, like the house took orders quietly. We reached the main room door and found it closed. I tried the knob. It turned a little and then bit back. My brother knocked. His hands were small and pink in the dim. We both shouted. On the other side, I heard plates and my parents' voices, steady and close. They didn't answer. "Hallway switch," my brother said. "Turn it on." I slid my palm along the wall where the switch lived. A spot rubbed smooth by years of touches. Cool plaster. No plate. No toggle. Just blank wall where it shouldn't be. "It's gone," I said. He laughed once and then cut it short. I guided his fingers to the spot. We both pressed the wall like it might give. Nothing. The boy was closer. I didn't hear a step. He simply took up more of the dark. The hair on my arms rose. He watched us check the wall again, patient. He knew what he was doing and wanted us to know it too. "Stop," I told him. The word sounded thin. I didn't have anything else to use. A small push of air slid past us. At the far end of the hall, a brass latch dropped with a soft tick. Behind us, a second door, one that always drifted open, settled shut, as if someone had set it carefully. We yelled for our parents again, loud enough that my throat stung. No footsteps, no reply. My brother started to cry for real, short breaths that made him hiccup. I tried the knob again. I put my shoulder into it and felt the frame hold. I pulled back. If force made it worse, maybe asking would do something. Our mom had warned us about slamming doors in this place, because the frame swelled in weather and stuck. I opened my hand and pressed my palm flat against the wood. "We want to come in," I said. Quiet, like a request at the library. The door didn't move. The boy's mouth twitched into a smile that didn't show teeth. A cold touch traced my wrist. It had the weight of a child taking a sister's hand. We stood there and waited. The window at the end of the hall held a long blue smear of evening. My brother leaned into me until we were one line against the wall. I understood what the boy liked about this. He had found a game only he could control. He could make a door insist. He could make a light switch vanish. He could keep us on his side of the house. Footsteps approached from the other side. Normal ones. My mother turned the knob without effort and opened the door into yellow light, and the smell of stew and soap. She stopped when she saw our faces. "Why are you two in the dark? Dinner's been ready." "We were locked out," I said. The lights went off, the door stuck. The switch. "What boy?" my father said from behind her. He had a dish towel over his shoulder. "Same as always." "The boy in the hall," my brother said. He turned the lights off. They looked at each other. My mother made her soft face, the one she used for lost homework. "And don't worry. We didn't hear any shouting," she said. "You must have been whispering." "Come on," my father added. "Sit. Eat." I turned to point. The switch sat right where it should be. White plate. Finger marks around it. My mother flicked it as she passed. The bulbs came up bright and ordinary. "It was gone," my brother said to me, angry and scared at once. I know, I kept my voice low. He wasn't wrong. We ate. My parents asked about homework and who said what at school. We tried to explain again. They smiled and told us the house made old sounds. My father did the thing where he knocks the table twice, like a stamp that ends a story. "Doors don't lock themselves," he said. My mother added, "Switches don't walk off walls." When I looked back down the hall, the window glass showed a faint reflection. A boy lifted his hand. It was either a wave or a promise. I blinked. The reflection smudged into the dark. Later, my brother blocked the bathroom door with his foot while brushing his teeth. He watched the hall in the mirror. He doesn't like them, he said through phone. Only us. Maybe he only notices us, I said. That fit. If they couldn't hear us and we could see him, then the circle was small and we were inside it. We left our bedroom door open the width of my palm. The hallway lay quiet. The place did its usual night sounds, a board somewhere contracting, a pipe remembering hot water, the wind working at the eaves. I stayed awake to catch him if he came back. If he had rules, I wanted to learn them. If he was bored, maybe he'd take less if I gave more. If he was just a kid, maybe he wanted a sister who could read the game and keep it fair. Sleep pulled me anyway. I don't remember falling. I woke to a small click next to my ear. The lamp across the room blinked off even though I hadn't turned it on. The door eased shut, not a slam, just the sound a door makes when a hand guides it home. I held my breath and counted to 3. No footsteps from my parents. No question about what we were doing awake. Only the house waiting, pleased with itself. I got up and checked the wall by habit. The switch was there. I pressed it. The bulb obeyed. When I turned it off again, the hall kept its blue-black. The smell of stew was gone, replaced by cool stone and old wood. My brother rolled over and pulled the blanket up to his chin. He didn't wake. In the morning, we told my parents everything a second time. We kept it to facts. Lights off, lock engaged, switch gone, and then back. My mother smiled the way she does when she's being patient. "You had a long day at school," she said. "Brains get tired, houses creak." We were yelling, my brother said, loud. "We didn't hear a thing," my father said. He touched the switch as he left the room. Casual. See? We did see. That was the point. We saw the hallway, the switch, the door, all in their places like evidence after someone has cleaned. We saw each other. We saw how fast a thing can happen and leave nothing to hold up besides your word. After school the next day, I told my brother we were sticking together. We checked the back door and left it open a hand's width to make a draft. We announced ourselves when we crossed the hall. We kept voices steady. We used the switch like normal and watched it stay a switch. We did everything the regular way on purpose. He showed up anyway. Not in a jump scare. He stood where he had before, just inside the corner where the hallway narrows toward the main room. His hands hung loose at his sides. His shirt looked like something out of an old picture, a little too big at the collar. He wasn't a blur now. He was exactly a boy, only unclaimed by anyone in my phone or in our family photos. "Do you want us to stay here?" I asked him. I kept my voice level. If I gave him yelling, he'd keep the game loud. If I gave him calm, maybe he'd choose quiet. He didn't answer. He looked at the switch and then at the door. The kitchen light clicked off. The hallway light followed. The back door latch fell. He didn't touch anything. He didn't have to. My brother grabbed my sleeve. I put my free hand on the doorknob and didn't twist. "We go slow," I said. "We don't shove. We try polite first." The boy watched me. I could feel whether he liked that or not. The silence tightened. I pressed the door with the flat of my hand. Soft pressure and steady breath. Nothing. I stopped. "Okay," I said. "We wait." That felt like the rule. Do not force. Do not feed it with panic. Make it boring. Keep a line to normal. We waited. We didn't call for our parents. We stood in the short dark and listened to the clock tick in the main room and the simmer of the pot on the stove. The boy's face flickered with something I recognized. A kid who wanted you to keep up. He tilted his head. His expression said he could shut us out anytime he liked, but he didn't have to if we could manage simple directions. The knob turned from the other side. My mother opened the door again as easily as before. "Soup," she said, a little puzzled at finding us in the dark, but not enough to ask why. She stepped past and turned the hallway light on without looking. The switch clicked under her thumb. It stayed where it was. At dinner, my brother stared down at his bowl. He had circles under his eyes. My father told a story about the market. My mother reminded me about a field trip form. We answered. We ate. We acted it out like any night. When we got up to clear our bowls, I glanced at the window. The hall showed in it again, and the boy's hand lifted. He didn't wave this time. He pressed his palm to the glass where my face hovered. I raised my hand in the air, not touching the real window. His hand met mine in the reflection anyway. The temperature of the room dropped for a second, not cold enough to see our breath, enough to notice. That night I left the door open again. I didn't try to catch him. I let it happen the way he wanted. The lamp clicked off. The door settled. No one came to ask what the noise was, because there wasn't any for them. I lay there awake a while and thought about rules that had nothing to do with dead kids, and everything to do with houses and attention, and how adults miss what doesn't call their names. In the morning, the switch was right where we left it. I looked at my palm and half expected to see a mark where the cold had pressed. There was nothing. That felt like his favorite part. He could make a space where two kids knew the truth and everyone they trusted could prove there was nothing to see. He didn't need to scare us out of the house. He just needed us in it, inside his rules, while our parents said it was all fine. When I walked past the hallway that afternoon, I kept my hand loose at my side. I didn't look for him. I said in a normal voice, "We're going to the kitchen." I put my fingers on the switch and turned on the light. It worked. I held the door. I didn't slam. I didn't shove. I didn't feed the game. He could still play. He did. But now he had to meet me halfway. And halfway meant waiting with me while the house stayed ordinary for as long as I could make it. At least that was something I could do. At least it was a rule I could hold, even if no one else heard it at all. I rented the upstairs half of a beige duplex in Parma, just outside Cleveland. The stairs were steep, the bedroom ceiling sloped, and the windows threw striped light across the floor in the early afternoon. I moved in with a bow-backed mattress and 4 boxes of books. The landlord was my cousin's friend, Mark, who kept receipts in a shoebox and called repairs we'll see. It was quiet between lunch and rush hour. I liked that. I could sit on the bed and read while the house settled and the fridge cycled. The mail truck hissed. The street went soft for a few hours and then woke up again. The lower tenant worked nights. He was decent about noise and trash cans. I was decent about parking and not running the vacuum early. The bedroom had a single outlet near the nightstand that sparked if you didn't seat the plug right, and a clock that blinked after every small outage. The city once mailed me a water bill addressed to Upper C, which turned into 20 minutes on hold, and a clerk who said the letter meant nothing and everything. I paid it and taped the stub to my fridge. It felt like a small win in an apartment where the kitchen floor leaned if you set a heavy bag too close to the pantry. I was halfway through a used paperback from the library sale when it happened. No sound, no cold rush or shift in air. The bed dipped to my right as if the mattress knew exactly where to make room. I turned my head, and she was there. She wasn't see-through. Her body had its own light and shade. She wore a long dress with a fitted waist and small buttons, sleeves to her elbows, skirt to her ankles, sturdy cloth, no zipper. Her shoes fastened with little buttons you'd need a hook to close. Her hair was pinned back. No hat, no jewelry. Her book was a small cloth-bound hardback with rounded corners, the kind of thing you find in a family trunk and handle carefully. She sat close enough to touch. I didn't move my hands. They stayed on my paperback. My heart hit once hard and went quiet behind my ribs. She smiled, a small tilt at the corner of her mouth that didn't ask for anything. It wasn't for me. Not directly. It existed on her face. She looked down at her book. I took in the seams of her sleeve and the line at her wrist where the fabric folded when she bent her arm. The dress was from a time before the duplex was built. I knew that the same way you know which chair in a thrift store held a real person for years, and which one just came off a truck. I didn't know why I knew. I knew. The bed lifted under my leg. She was gone. No puff, no fade. There and then not there. The light across the floor didn't shift. The blinds hung the same. I closed my book and set it on my chest. I waited for my heart to slow. I stood and crossed to the window. My car was in the driveway, chalked in dust from a week without rain. The plastic flamingo across the street leaned in a patch of dead grass. The sheet where she had sat stayed smooth. I pressed my palm there anyway. It was cool in the shadow. I poured a glass of water in the kitchen. and watched the tap cough brown and then run clear. The stove clock blinked. I didn't fix it. I went down the steep stairs to the mailbox. Eddie from the lower unit stood on the walk and asked if my bathroom leaked, because his ceiling stain was spreading. I said no. We both texted Mark, and he texted back okay. He followed with a message about rent in the mailbox the next morning, because he'd be on the east side. I tucked the envelope behind the phone bill and went back upstairs. The wobbly kitchen chair skittered under my hand and stopped against the wall. I left the paperback on the nightstand and looked at the dent that wasn't there. I told myself to eat something, then didn't. I lay down and watched the light crawl up the sloped ceiling and cut across a nail pop that had worked through under the paint. I stared until the shadow softened and the room got boring again, which is what I wanted. The next day, early afternoon, I sat on the bed with the same book. I opened it to my place and kept one hand on the page so it wouldn't fall shut. I didn't say anything into the room. I didn't ask for anything. The house had its sounds, distant TV through the floor, someone clattering a bin lid 2 houses over, one car idling and leaving. When the mattress settled beside me, I didn't jerk. It felt less like a person arriving than a shape the bed recognized. She was there, book in hand. She looked at her page. I looked at mine. I could hear the cheap wall clocks tick now because I knew to notice it. I read a sentence, and the next one. I kept my breath steady so I could keep my hands steady. My eyes slid to her sleeve and stayed there. Her skin had texture, no glow, no trick, just skin with a thin shadow along the bone. I didn't test for heat or weight, I didn't lean. The room held. She smiled when I closed my paperback. The sound of paper on paper was a small, exact thing. Her mouth eased. Maybe that was in my head. Maybe not. She lifted her book a fraction. Busy, not rude. Then the mattress rose. She was gone. A truck hit a pothole down the street and rolled on. The clock ticked. The room stayed plain. That night I left a different book open on the bed. Not the library sale one. I owned this one. I set it near where she had sat. It felt like putting a place card down. I didn't know if it mattered. I brushed my teeth with the bathroom door propped open because the frame swelled and the latch stuck when the humidity climbed. I listened to the TV downstairs, all sirens and ads, and fell asleep before the last break. Morning. I worked my shift at the library. I checked in returns and wiped fingerprints from a keyboard. A woman asked for tax forms. I printed a sheet with the download link and slid one extra copy across the counter because her face said she might lose the first. At lunch, I walked for coffee, and the lid didn't seat right and it dripped down my wrist. I pressed a napkin to it and kept moving. When my head started to collect the afternoon light like a habit, I went home. The book lay open where I had left it. The blinds cut lines across the pages. I sat. I touched the paper. It was cool. I waited. Nothing. I read a chapter and put the book face down and walked to the kitchen. The chair wobbled when I leaned left. I went back to the bedroom and stood in the doorway and told myself the shape of the afternoon didn't owe me anything. It helped. I repeated the routine. Early afternoon. Door cracked because the frame liked to pinch when it relaxed later. An open book on the bed. I didn't expect her like a schedule. I set the room the way it was when she came, because that was a thing I could do. Readers do that. We mark a page and come back. On the 4th day, the mattress gave again. She was there. The book in her hands could have been a prayer book, or a ledger, or a novel. Without print, I knew. I couldn't tell. The way she held it told me it mattered. She smiled. I lifted my palm a few inches off my knee before I knew I was doing it. Then I let it fall. She vanished before my hand reached the space. The bed rose. The clock ticked, steady again. I mentioned it to Mark when he stopped by to tape a notice about new trash pickup times under the mailbox lid. We stood on the porch. I said a woman sat on the bed in the early afternoon and read. He said his aunt once described a vibe upstairs and made jittery hands like he'd had too much coffee. I said it wasn't a vibe. He offered the lower unit next time it opened up because of the stairs. I said I was fine. He nodded in a way that told me he'd filed it under harmless and moved on to a plumbing receipt. I didn't tell Eddie. Nothing about his face asked for that kind of conversation. I did look up the duplex on the county website to see the year it went up. The date matched the siding and the stairs. It didn't match the dress. I didn't have a reason for that. I didn't try to build one. Some afternoons she came, some she didn't. When she was there, the street noise thinned and the light steadied. Or maybe I stopped checking for interruptions because I didn't want to split the moment. When she wasn't, I read anyway. I still left the book open some nights. I still propped the bathroom door when the frame swelled. I still caught my toe on the lumped rug at the threshold the way I always did when I forgot to lift. I never spoke to her, I never reached out. It didn't feel like restraint so much as the shape of the visit. She brought herself. She brought a book. I learned to close mine when she smiled. That felt right. I didn't test the rule. Once, after she left, I pressed my palm to the spot where she had been and held it there for the space of 2 breaths. The sheet was cool. The mattress held only me. The quiet wasn't empty. It was just quiet. I lived there 2 years. When the rent went up and my hours got cut, the math didn't work. I packed the books into the same boxes. Corners softened from tape and moves. On my last afternoon, I opened a paperback on the bed and stood in the door and watched the light. I didn't wait long. The bed didn't change. I closed the book and slid it into my tote. I locked the door and left the key in an envelope on the counter, where Mark had drawn a smiley face with a ballpoint pen. The wobbly chair stayed. The spark-prone outlet stayed. The room waited for whatever came next. In the new place, the fire alarm flashes instead of rings, and the bathroom door sticks for a different reason. Some afternoons when the light falls in a way that makes the day go quiet for an hour, I set my book open on the bed, not as an invitation, not a test, a habit that steadies my hands and marks a place. If a visitor sits beside me, we will read. If not, the page turns when it turns. The memory warms when it shows up and leaves when it's done. I don't keep it. I don't have to. It stays. I was the friend covering bedtime because their mom picked up an extra shift. It was a Friday, which meant I paid extra for parking and pretended the garage gate would finally get fixed. I had both kids showered, fed, and in pajama pants that collected crumbs faster than the kitchen counter. The balcony door stood cracked because the night was warm and the place held heat. We were on the 2nd floor, facing a twin building across a narrow courtyard, 2 brick rectangles sharing a strip of patchy grass, a row of mailboxes, and a light that hummed and couldn't pick a color. The kids spread out on the couch with a cartoon. I stacked dishes in the washer wrongly. I later learned from a note on the machine and checked the chain on the front door. The lease had rules about balcony plants and quiet hours. Nothing about what to do if something large moved out there. I kept my phone face down on the counter to avoid doom scrolling. That lasted 7 minutes, which for me counts as discipline. When I stepped back into the living room, Lily had her knees pulled up and her eyes on the balcony. Her brother Micah held a toy car with both hands and didn't push it. The sliding door frame cut the night into a long rectangle. Courtyard light pooled dull across the tile. I said we would do teeth in 5. Lily didn't blink. She said a name. 1 word, 2 beats, like she was reporting a fact and asking a question. She said it in a way that tightened my skin. I moved closer. Our balcony had an iron railing with vertical bars, a low planter with brittle dirt, and a plastic chair with 1 leg taped. Beyond that was the air gap and the opposite building's 2nd floor walkway, a continuous balcony running along a row of doors. At this hour, nothing should have been on it except maybe a delivery person with loose ethics. There was something on it. It took a second to understand size, not because it hid, but because it lacked edges my brain knew. It was a mass, tall, thick through the middle, not shaped like a person with arms down. It occupied space along the walkway, near the unit across and to the right from us, and it moved in a way that didn't match joints. It didn't sway or walk. Parts relocated, and then relocated again, like it had options a body doesn't. Lily said the name again. Very quiet. She'd seen it before, or she thought she had. The word sat in the air like it belonged to the dark. I put my hand behind me and got hold of Micah's shirt. I said the TV was going off and we were going to brush early. He didn't argue. I kept my body between them and the balcony. I didn't flip any switches. The courtyard light carried just enough, and I didn't want motion at the wall to announce us. Across the gap, a segment of the mast lifted higher than a head would go. It held there, then dropped, like it was testing where the top rail fell. The railing should have cut clean lines through anything solid. It didn't cut lines through this. The bars vanished inside it. Shadow wasn't the right word. Person wasn't allowed. I told Lily to get her toothbrush. She stayed planted. She said it knew when kids were outside. She said it like she was giving me the weather. I raised my phone and swiped to the camera, because documenting is easier than deciding what to say. My hand shook. The lens grabbed static and grain and a block of black along the opposite walkway. The autofocus ticked and let go. I took a photo anyway. The image looked like a smudge on a smudge. The timestamp was precise where everything else wasn't. Micah made a small breath through his mouth and stepped behind my legs. He didn't cry. Lily held the hem of my shirt with 2 fingers. I didn't know why it was here. I didn't know where it came from. I knew Lily's attention had brought it to me, and her attention stayed on it the way a kid watches a stove they've been warned about. I slid the balcony latch. The catch clicked. It wasn't loud, but it felt loud. Across the gap, the mast rolled a segment and came closer by. Not stepping, it covered distance without footfalls. It held a hint of shoulder just long enough for me to believe it, then gave it back. I cut the decision tree down to 1 branch. I gathered the kids' hands on shoulders, steady pressure, and edged them down the hall to the bathroom. The hall light popped on under my thumb, and then off again, before we reached the window above the tub. I didn't want our movement backlit. We moved through the dim. The TV bled blue because I hadn't turned it off. The kids brushed with silent compliance. It is odd what they do when they read the adults' limits. I called their mom. It rang and rolled to voicemail. I spared my breath and hung up. On the way back with 2 damp-chinned kids and 3 toothbrushes in my fist. Mine, not theirs. I grab things when I'm nervous. I let the cheap carpet report under my socks. We reached the living room. I kept them to the left along the interior wall. The sliding door held its slice of night. The mass had learned where we were. It had height above the railing that made me measure the bars with my eyes. If a person stood there, their head would hit just below the top rail. This rose above the header and kept going. The top rail vanished inside it and did not interrupt its shape. It was not fog. It was not smoke. Smoke moves like air and threads the light. This held itself together without looking rigid. Lily whispered that it didn't like when people yelled. She wasn't trying to help me. She was moving knowledge from her head to the air. Micah pressed his hand into Lily's pajama leg and found fabric. I did the only fast thing my body allowed. I turned off the TV. The sound stopped. The room sharpened. I took 3 photos in a row. The second caught the courtyard light dimming for a blink, then coming back. In all 3, the opposite walkway was a dark band with a darker shape where it stood. When I pinched to zoom, the pixels scattered and gave me less. I told the kids to sit on the floor behind the couch. They did. I sat at the couch edge. I kept one eye on the door and one on the glass. My heart hit the base of my throat and stayed there. I didn't say the name Lily had used. I didn't show them the screen. I didn't touch the curtains. I didn't flip the porch switch because there wasn't a bulb. Across from us, the mass edged a dark portion out over the walkway, as if testing air. It didn't sag. It withdrew cleanly. It was large and it maintained itself. It moved with intent and without joints, and that made every motion wrong. My body wanted to freeze and run. I picked a freeze with options. If the glass cracked, I would pull both kids to the bathroom and shut the door. The glass did not crack. The railing did not squeal. The hum from the courtyard light stayed steady. The room smelled like dish soap and dust, and warm iron from the day. It hung there. It watched. I can't offer eyes, but I can offer the weight of being looked at. I wanted that wrongness to pass over us. Minutes stretched. A door below closed in a plain way. Laughter came from the far lot as someone walked to a car. The sound cut through. The figure didn't flinch at the human noise. It withdrew in a measured unspooling I could track, moving along the second floor walk, piece by piece, until the corner took it. It didn't round the corner. It stopped existing where we could see. I put both hands on the couch and felt the cheap weave. I waited a full count. I told the kids we were camping in the bedroom. I pulled a blanket onto the floor and tucked another under the door. I set them with pillows between the bed and the dresser, feet toward the hall. I lay on the carpet by the door with my shoulder against it, and my phone in my hand. At 9:41, their mom texted to ask if bedtime went okay. I typed yes and then no, and deleted both. I sent, "We're fine, all good, call when you can." She sent back a heart and a photo of a break room coffee. I didn't sleep. At some point, Lily did. Micah did. I watched the green diode on the charger breathe, and held the urge to check the balcony until it turned into a rule. In the morning, the opposite walkway was empty. The railing was just a railing. The light had picked a color again. When their mom came home, I said we had a weird night. She said people across the way kept odd hours. I nodded. I didn't argue. I sent her the photos later. She said she could kind of see a shape in the second one if she tilted the phone, but maybe that was the angle. I let that be true. I checked the sliding door lock twice before I left. I checked the chain. The parking gate opened on the first try. I turned onto 38th and waited at the light. People crossed with coffees and dogs. A bus pulled up and exhaled. I watched faces in dark windows until the light changed. I didn't know why any of it happened. I knew how it looked from our side, and I knew who I would stand in front of again. Now when I'm at that apartment, I keep the blinds closed after dark. I avoid the balcony and keep the kids away from it. I stopped the TV earlier. I do not say the name Lily used. I don't stand at the glass to see if something stands back. We had been driving desert 2 lanes for hours, the kind that runs straight and stop talking the second you lose radio. No moon, no service. The map lived in the glove box because the turnoffs out here all look the same and you trust paper when the dashboard goes dumb. The road was clean, black, and endless. The air through the vents had that chalky, dry bite that makes you sip water even when you're not thirsty. The man showed up at the edge of the high beams like a post you didn't see during the day. Tall, too pale, old clothes under a mining helmet. His lamp burned a tight blue point, not the warm yellow you expect from a headlamp. Blue, steady, and unnatural in the way fluorescent lights are unnatural when they hum inside a skull. The beam didn't spread, it just existed, perfect and wrong. I eased off the gas. Gravel began to whisper under the tires. We slid into a turnout across from him. He didn't turn. He didn't reach up to shade his eyes. He didn't do anything at all. "You see him," I said, because naming a thing makes it hold still in your head. "Yeah," Maya said. She stared past the dash. Jamal leaned forward between the seats, one hand on the headrest. "Don't stop," he said. I had already stopped. We killed the headlights to get the windshield glare out of the way. The night closed over us without fuss. The blue point sharpened, clean against the dark. It didn't flicker. The desert has wind even when it feels calm. Little drafts that find your ears and set anything loose to moving. His lamp stayed constant. His sleeves didn't move either. No one spoke for a long minute. You listen to the engine tick as it cools, and you start noticing what else is not making noise. The insects held off. A coyote that had been yipping somewhere down the wash went quiet. "What's with the helmet?" Maya asked. "Lo looks old." "Park's full of dead claims," Jamal said. "Salt, borax, whatever they thought was money." They dug, they left. I opened my door. The cold came in hard and clean. It smelled like rock and dry plants. My boots made a clear sound on the gravel. The shoulder dropped away in a slow slope toward brush. I stopped a few paces from the white line and looked at him from under the brim of the night. Closer. The clothes read as wrong, for now in small specific ways. High-waisted pants held by suspenders, a patched shirt, a jacket with a flat worn sheen like soot, had worked into it and never washed out. The helmet was leather and metal instead of plastic. The lamp sat in a glass cup, bubbled a little, the blue sitting inside it like an eye. The light didn't touch his face, it didn't touch anything. It was a point without spill. "Sir," I said, "do you need help?" Nothing. The line of his shoulders and the tilt of his head looked set by a hand and left to harden. The stillness was total. Not the kind you get when someone is trying to stand still. The kind you find in a display case. "Come back," Maya said from the car. Her voice caught on the last word. "Please." I took one more step and felt my skin go to static. Not fear first. Physics. The kind of wrong where your body tells you the space ahead is not the same as the space you are in. I stopped. I don't push through those feelings in the desert. People who do get written up in the park newsletter. "Don't go closer," Jamal said. Seriously. I stood there and watched. The wind moved through the scrub. It did not touch him. Dust crossed the road and went around him like water goes around a pole. The blue kept burning. Maya tried her phone. No signal. She set it face down on the dash like a decision. "People talk about him out here," she said after a beat. "My cousin drove this stretch last winter. She said she rolled past a man in an old helmet with a blue light. Same stance. Same everything. Then he was up the road again. Unchanged. Park brochure said old shafts." I said, "Don't leave the road. Don't trespass. Ground gives out." "Yeah," Jamal said. "Let's not test it." I backed up a step and the static eased. I went back to the car. We sat there with the engine idling and the heat cutting the cold. The blue light sat across from us, a punctuation mark at the road's edge. A pair of headlights came from the east and slowed. A dusty SUV drifted even with us, then rolled a few feet forward and stopped. The driver's window lowered. A woman leaned over from the wheel and looked across the road. "You see him," she said. Not a question. We nodded. "You from around here?" she asked. "No." She watched the man like people watch weather. He's always like that. Doesn't move, doesn't go away. If you go closer than you did, you get dizzy. Like altitude, but wrong. She tipped her chin toward the black hills. "Mine's up there. My dad told me the lamp started blue after a cave-in. People say a lot. I only say what I see." "Does the light ever change?" Maya asked. The woman shook her head. "No." She looked at me. "Be good to the land. It keeps score." She raised 2 fingers in a small wave and eased back onto the road. The SUV slid away and took its headlights with it. The blue stayed. "What now?" Jamal asked. My trapio pulled. "We drive," I said. "We don't touch it. We remember where." I put the car in gear and rolled forward slow. When we were parallel with him, the static grazed the car. The cabin air felt thin for a second, then cleared. I kept the wheel straight and my eyes forward. The light hung at the edge of my vision until the angle took it away. A quarter mile later, the shoulder widened before a shallow basin. The road lifted a little. I checked the mirror. He still stood back there, exact as before. Then the blue showed up ahead of us again. Same pose, same distance to the stripe, same centered stare into nothing. The one behind us stayed where he was. The one ahead waited. "Don't stop," Maya said. I didn't. We passed him. The same pressure touched the car and let go. We met him a third time past a cattle guard and a fourth, as the road bent east. By then we weren't talking. The pattern, if that's what you call it, when the same thing keeps being where you do not expect it, held as long as it held. Then we were alone with asphalt and scrub again. The blue never followed. It was always ahead or behind, pinned to certain places like markers on a map you can't buy. The town on the far side of the park had 2 lamps over a cross street, a diner that kept coffee right until closing, and a motel where the vacancy sign told the truth. We took a booth and ordered eggs and toast and coffee, because that's what your hands know how to ask for when your brain has run out of better plans. The waitress listened to the part where we said blue headlamp and nodded like this was weather too. "People say he shows up by the old wash," she said, "also out by mile marker 63 and the turn toward the radio tower. My uncle swears he saw him during a brush fire and the smoke went around him. My sister says she pulled over to cry once and he was already there. She didn't tell us what he was. She gave us places. At the motel, I sat on a hard bed and read an old forum on my phone. The kind that looks like it has never been updated because the posts keep showing up anyway. Truckers, rangers, night photographers. The details matched. Period clothing, mining helmet, blue light that never flickers, dead still. A few names lined up with the waitress's markers. One guy said he put his hand out and his skin went to pins and needles, and he threw up off the shoulder. A park volunteer said you could set your watch by where he wasn't and still be wrong by the mile. We added our turnoff and our time. It felt like putting a rock on a stack so the next person knows the trail turns there. We kept it simple. I didn't sleep great. Every time a semi went by on the highway outside, the sound pushed under the door and pulled me back up. I lay there with my eyes open and thought about what a steady light means when everything else in the desert trembles a little. I stared at the ceiling until the room went from black to gray. In the morning, we drove back to the spot we had marked on the paper map. Daylight made everything reasonable again. The blue was gone. The shoulder had tire marks and the scratchy writing, "Small animals leave when they cross open ground." No footprints that matched his boots. No dropped hardware. The brush moved a little in a breeze I could feel on my face. We walked the edge and looked for something that would make sense of the night. Broken glass, a post, a reflector, nothing. A hawk rode the air over the wash and made no sound. "It doesn't mean we didn't see it," Maya said. She touched the white line with the toe of her shoe. "No," I said. "It means he stays with the dark." I folded the map and slid it back into the glove box. We got in and pulled away slow. I am not going to tell you what he is. I'm not guessing at physics or ghosts. Here is what I know. We were in a park with old mines and no people for a long way in any direction. We saw a tall, pale man standing by the road in old clothes with a mining helmet. His lamp burned blue and steady. He never moved. We parked, watched, and asked a stranger who had seen him before. Then we drove on and saw him again in different places while the first one stayed where he was. We didn't touch the shoulder. We didn't test the ground. We wrote down where and when, and we left it for whoever needs it next. If you take that road at night, keep your hands easy on the wheel, and your lights where they belong. If you see a blue point at the shoulder and a figure under it that refuses to be a person, don't go closer than feels smart. Roll past, note the mile, and breathe. When the town arrives, tell someone, then sleep with the curtains open, a crack so the morning can come find you. The first time I saw him, I was counting bottles behind the bar. The old ceiling pressed low, the framed photos watched from their crooked lines, and Maple Street outside had gone to blinking yellow. Closing routine kept me moving in a circle. Cash drop, glassware, locks. I lifted my head to the front window, and there he was, a figure inside the glass, tall enough to line up with the mullions, between the window and the fern that never looked watered right. My hand stayed on the register drawer. The lights hummed. The ice machine ticked. I told myself this was why the manager liked to double-check my numbers, like anxiety had line items. I called out once. No answer. The figure didn't shift or breathe that I could see. Streetlight washed the floorboards and carved a clean heel-to-toe line across them. I blinked, just once, and the window held only my reflection in the fern. I walked to the door and tested the deadbolt. Solid. The cracked pane the owner calls historic. Sat quiet. I stood still and listened for one long breath. The fridge droned and the building settled. No footsteps. No scrape. Back at the office, I hit the button for the manager. He was still in back closing orders. I told him I'd seen a man inside the front window. He asked if I meant inside the glass or on the sidewalk, and I said inside. He didn't smile. That helped. We pulled the feed from the front camera. It shows the entry and a slice of the front seating. The timestamp lands about 30 seconds off because no one wants to argue with the vendor. The minute I looked up, the screen showed the fern, the glow from the street, and empty air. No figure. No one moving outside either. If I needed a hobby, I could start syncing cameras. He said we should walk the floor. He took a flashlight. I didn't, because my palms were damp and I wanted them empty. We passed the bar, crossed the dining room, and cut through the side hall to the old storage room. The door always sticks. You lean a shoulder, then it gives. He pushed it open and flicked the switch. Metal racks. Boxes labeled in a hand older than me. Glassware. Seasonal decor. A single high window making a pale rectangle on the far wall. He ran the beam along the shelves. No disturbed dust. No open boxes. No trace of anyone. Empty, he said. He could have been telling me the time. Back out front, he told me he'd seen it too. He called it a regular. Not a customer. Not a guest. A regular. He said it wasn't malicious and that it shows up late at the windows and sometimes by the back hall. He didn't tell me not to be scared. He gave me a rule. Say goodnight and finish your counts. Don't chase it. Lock the front. Finish in the back. Not a ritual. An instruction. I followed it. I locked the front. I balanced the drawer and stuffed the tips in the blue envelope. I checked the bathrooms and the back exit. The metal door felt cool under my hand. The room looked like a room. Good night, I said into it, because the word sat in my mouth and wanted out. I didn't know why that felt right. It just did. I drove home steady through the empty grid. My friend asked how the shift went. I said slow, and that my feet hurt and we needed more napkin sleeves because they crush in the drawer if you stack them. I joked about adding sleeve shipper to my resume. She laughed and handed me a glass of water. I brushed my teeth until the tap warmed, then stared at my face until the bathroom fan found its rhythm. 2 nights later, I was wrapping silverware when Erica asked if I'd ever gotten the storage door to stay open on the first try. I said no. She needed glass racks and asked if I was done with the ice well. I said yes. The TV in the corner showed a basketball game without sound. The dining room stood empty, chairs squared to tables, floor swept to dull lines. I looked up at the front and the figure was back, same spot in the window, inside the glass. The streetlight tagged a shoulder and the slope of a head, still. It read like a person taking a quiet place and holding it. I didn't move. I didn't talk. I went to the office, told the manager, and he stood up right away. We walked together. No flashlight this time. By the host stand, the spot was empty again. The fern leaned toward the glass in its chipped pot. He met my eyes, not to question, but to say he knew. Same rule, lock the front, finish in the back, say goodnight. I locked the deadbolt and felt the clean click. I moved along the bar and picked my feet up instead of scuffing. In the side hall, the storage door stood in its frame like a darker rectangle. Erica was there with a rack of clean pints. She said the door had swelled or the frame had shifted, or maybe a bolt was bad. Her words were steady. She couldn't get it to go. I set the rack down and leaned in. The door gave, then caught against something that wasn't wood. It wasn't a slam. It was pressure. I leaned harder and it released in a smooth inch and swung. Erica's face didn't change. She lifted her rack and walked out. I stood in the doorway and put my hand on the light switch. The room smelled like cardboard and soap. I didn't step inside. I waited 2 beats because my body wanted me to. I flipped the light off and closed the door without testing it again. Day shift the next morning. Sun made the dust float over the shelves. Maple Street felt normal. Our friend Ben from the bookstore came in for an early sandwich. He squinted at the fern and asked why it looked worse. I told him it came with the building and it didn't like me. He offered to swap it with a fake if we brought in a real one, because he hates fakes that fool no one. I said sure, as long as the owner kept his historical crack. He asked what I did late now that winter was back. I told him I'd do the counts, lock the front and finish in the back. He waited for more. I topped off his water. He left his usual tip. When he stood, he paused at the window and glanced down like he'd dropped a coin. He moved on. That night, the wind shifted. Leaf bags tore loose and skittered along Maple, catching and peeling off the curb in bursts. The front glass flexed and clicked once. I walked my route slower around corners, not dragging it out, just giving the hallways their distance. I checked the front right before I killed the bar lights. No figure. Streetlight made a clean stripe on the tile. My reflection stood where it should, and the fern's outline sat where it always sits. In the back hall, I paused at the storage door. My palm went to the latch. Stick, then give, then the small catch that had become familiar. I didn't force it. I took my hand off and looked at the hinges. Nothing cracked, nothing bent. I said goodnight to the space and turned the back bolt. The metal slid home. In the office, I sealed the envelope and wrote my name even though no one needs it when I'm closer. The rule had become muscle memory. On the drive home, I let the idea of quitting sit in the passenger seat. I like my job. I like the regulars who have faces and wallets and talk about the game. A regular with no tab didn't fit a neat column. The engine ticked as it cooled when I parked. My hands rested on the wheel. I breathed once and went in. I worked the late shift for the rest of the month. The figure returned twice that I can say without stretching it. Same window, same stillness. I didn't chase it. I didn't set up tape to measure distances. I didn't try to trick the camera. I told the manager and got a nod. Erica stopped letting the storage door close behind her and wedged it with a rubber stop. That counted as policy. We didn't call anyone in. No cleansings, no posts. The bar stayed a bar. Cold beer, clean lines, lights that worked, black and white photos on the wall, the corner TV with sports, the door latch that catches if you move it right. Sometimes on the quiet turn toward closing, I'd stand by the register with the blue envelope and look at the window. If he was there, I said goodnight and kept moving. If he wasn't, I said it anyway. I don't know who I saw or why he stood inside the glass. I don't know why the storage door gives twice on some nights. The cause never showed itself. The building has a reputation, and I accepted it. I do the counts. I lock the front. I finish in the back. I say goodnight. Then I turn out the lights and go. I went into the forest to count owls, and ended up rearranging my life around a footprint. My name is Aaron. I'm a wildlife biologist out of Portland. The week started like any other field rotation along the western edge of the Gifford Pinchot, a late-season survey in old growth where the map shades into deep green, and the roads don't have signs, just numbers on faded posts. I camped near a vacant Forest Service house by a spur road off Wind River Highway because the porch was flat. The eaves kept the dew off, and the house had a working faucet that groaned. The windows were boarded. Moss ran a clean line where the gutters should have been. It was quiet. I had my routine, check the weather, log coordinates, listen and log calls between midnight and sunrise. One thermos of coffee early, then one after. I kept the tent under the firs, 10 strides from the porch. My truck stayed where I could see it. I kept notes on paper and backed them up to a voice recorder because forms get lost and batteries lie. The first night after the last set of calls, a sound rolled down the road, a heavy engine moving slow. Not a small pickup, not a side-by-side. The sound came up the grade, paused near the vacant house, and idled. No light swept the trees. I waited for the click of a door or a radio. Nothing. The engine noise faded as if it had eased past the house and drifted downslope. I walked to the edge of the porch and looked through the dark. The road bend hid most of the approach, and the canopy ate starlight. The house sat empty. My truck clicked as it cooled. I stood there and took a breath I could count. The next morning I checked the road for fresh tracks and found none that matched the sound. The gravel showed tires, the old ones blurred by frost crust melting off. I chalked it up to echo. Engines carry in these valleys. One ranger once told me you can hear someone brush their teeth across a drainage if the wind sets right. I logged the night, packed a day bag, and hiked the transect to the first point. I kept my humor early, like a rule. When I set the audio recorder the first time and realized I'd left the windscreen back in the tub, I told myself it was a budget problem with my own brain. When I called dispatch to confirm the road closure dates and spent 6 minutes on hold while the same loop explained that menu options have changed, I decided the menu was the only thing that had. That was the last of it. Once I hit the second night, the tone shifted, and I kept it that way. By the second night, the quiet had a recoil. I listened to barred owls trade their odd laughs and felt something else. Weight in the understory. During a pause between calls, a branch snapped cleanly to my left at a distance I could fix by the way the sound arrived. I let my headlamp hang and stood still. Silence. I marked the time and kept working. When the dawn came, I walked my usual circle around camp to check for sign. That's when I saw them. 2 impressions in the damp loam beyond the last fringe of duff, parallel to my tent line. Each one long, with a toe spread that wasn't a boot. Not a bear, not anything I had a category for. I put my palm down inside one print. My fingers splayed and did not span the width. The depth told me weight, the edges told me recent. I crouched there and named the possible menagerie. Black bear hindprints can fool you when they overlap. These didn't overlap, elk set a different pattern. Human tracks showed treads, marks, junk. These had clean pads and a ridge at the midfoot, like pressure had rolled across. I took photos with a ruler for scale. I measured 33 centimeters from heel to toe, give or take. The gate between them would have placed the hip high. I did not know why they were there or where they went. I did not pretend I did. I told myself to stay in my lane. I am not paid for monsters. I logged the prints with the same precision I use for nest cavities: time, location, dimension, substrate. I ignored interpretation and focused on sequence. I marked the tracks with flagged twigs and went out for the survey blocks. The forest held its usual list: red-breasted nuthatch tapping, tree frogs sawing, the wind sliding low. When I returned late afternoon, my cooler had a new position under the table, and the enamel mug I'd left on the porch rail sat 3 feet to the right on the step. My tent's front tie laid in a clean curve instead of its original straight line. I keep a tidy camp, not because I am fussy, but because tidy stands out when it changes. The mug had no dirt ring in its new place. The cooler had no drag marks. Nothing was missing. The stove was where I left it. The food bin still latched. I walked once around the clearing, slow. No shoe prints, no hooves here. In the darker patch under the cedar, the duff had a new depression, broad, shallow. I set my recorder to continuous and spoke the inventory into it. Then I sat on the porch step and listened to the little knotted muscles in my back make themselves known. The third night came down hard. Fog hung in the mid-story and turned the beam of my headlamp into a short rod I could carry but not throw. I set my alarm in 2-hour blocks. Between alarms, I half slept and listened to the air move. Sometime after midnight, the same engine sound came up the road. Heavy, slow, methodical. It reached the bend, paused, idled again. I sat up and put on my jacket. The idling continued, steady. No headlights cut the fog. I lifted the tent flap and checked. The fog whitened the road. The sound filled the space without pointing. It lasted long enough that my breath found a rhythm to match it. Then it stopped. Not a fade, a stop, like a key turned. I left the tent at first light with the recorder and a clipboard. The road showed nothing fresh again. The gravel held a raccoon's map and some deer. The ditch had new moisture. The air held wood smoke that had to come from a mile off. On the way back, I followed my own boot lines through the sword ferns and stepped into the clearing. The creature stood in the open patch east of camp where an old cedar stump had rotted into red crumbs. I got 2 seconds before it moved. It stood up on 2 legs. It had long arms. Its body was tall enough that my eyes struck its sternum first, then rose. Dark fur covered it, matted in some places, straighter in others, as if weather had worked it into lines. Its head didn't have the blocky front of a bear. The shoulders were broad. The chest moved with steady breaths that the cold held as small clouds. It turned its head slightly, just enough to mark me. I didn't know if it smelled dirt, or coffee, or me. Its hands hung near where a thigh would be on a human frame. The left hand opened and closed once, a physical act of tendon and muscle resetting grip. It took 2 steps backward, quiet in the needle bed. Then it turned and moved through the salal with a sound like a coat pulled through shrubs. The branches rocked and stilled. The clearing went back to the same air as before, but it wasn't the same. I stood where I had stopped and counted my systems. Vision clear, no ringing in my ears, heart rate up but controlled. I brought up the recorder and described exactly what I had seen. I did not add theory. My hands shook anyway. The fog rose and thinned. Birds started their mid-morning pattern. I took a breath and followed the path to the edge of the clearing. The salal opened where it passed. In the soil there, another set of impressions matched the earlier ones. I placed the ruler. The numbers did not change. The stride here covered more ground than I comfortably could. The ferns were pushed aside at a height that told me the knee went through, not a belly. I stepped back. I went to the tent and zipped it. I packed the essentials into the truck as if I had all day to do it. I did not slam a door. The urge to leave was loud. The urge to stay and understand sat heavier. The job has rules. We do not chase. We do not bait. We do not harass. We record. We return. We compare. A lot of my work is waiting to see if the same owl returns to the same snag. You learn to trust repetition. You learn to distrust your mind's desire to turn patterns into shapes. That morning, the shapes were literal. I stayed. That day, I altered my plan. I moved the tent closer to the porch, not for safety but for vantage. I set 2 small strips of surveyor's tape on the ground at the porch edge, loose enough that a step would drag them, and tight enough that wind would not. I placed the mug back where I had found it on the step. I left a paper form weighted by a rock on the rail. I wrote the time on it and left a gap. Then I took the trail beyond the clearing to a knoll that gave me a view of the camp through the last third of an old split-rail fence. I sat behind the root mass of a fallen Douglas fir and watched. The afternoon passed in the ordinary way. Juncos skipped along the porch boards. A squirrel raided the top layer of the food bin until its claws squeaked on the plastic. I shooed it once and went back to the knoll. My back hurt. My knees started to complain. I waited until dusk, then I went down and made food. I ate on the porch and recorded the lack of events like a ledger. When I left to check a point near a creek crossing about 20 minutes and returned, the mug had moved again. Not far, not like a prank. It was placed square in the center of the top step. The paper form had a crease near the edge, a new one that hadn't been there. The tape strips were a foot apart now. The wind had not picked up. The trees told me as much. I felt eyes, and I didn't write that down because feeling eyes is not an observation. The facts were enough. Night settled with no rain. The house made small noises as temperature shifted the boards. I sat on the porch until after midnight. I had my light off and the recorder on my lap and the thermos warm against my leg. There are parts of the forest that feel old because they are a century of growth. Over older timber is common here, and the floor rot. Fungus, new shoots works like lungs. I listened to it. At some point, the idling returned. The heavy engine stopped by the bend. The same pause, the same steady note. I waited for a man to call out. No one did. I stood and walked to the edge of the porch boards. The sound filled the road cut and bled into the brush. I tried to triangulate with my head, useless in fog. After a long minute, the idling cut, neat as if a switch threw. My teeth set, not from fear, from control. I slept little. I dreamed not at all. In the hours before dawn, a soft impact came from the tent side, a pressure that bowed the fabric inward for a second, and then let it go. A palm would do that. A hip would too. I sat up. I did not speak. The sound did not repeat. I listened to every small thing as if it had a label, and then I let them be. When dawn rose, I went straight to the side of the tent. There, in the needles, a shallow mark ran parallel to the stake line. The guy line had a new angle. On the porch, the tape strips lay in neat lines a step from where I'd placed them. The mug sat in the same center spot on the top step, unchanged. I wrote the time and moved nothing. After coffee, I walked to the clearing again and found fresh impressions along the same trackway as the day before. The stride increased near a low log, then resumed. Beyond, in a small pocket of bare ground, the front of one impression showed a line where something had dragged the edge of a toe or a nail. I put the ruler down and took the angle. The print was clear enough for me to count ridges on a pad. I stopped counting, because counting would not improve the truth. I saw it again, that afternoon, not as close. It stood in filtered light at the far side of the clearing. The air warmed just enough to set light insects moving. The thing watched me. I watched it. I shifted my weight. It tracked that shift. The line of sight held long enough for me to feel the press of it in my chest. Then it moved on a diagonal into thicker trees and vanished without hurry. I packed that night with a careful sort. I left a copy of my notes under a rock on the porch with a date. I took the original with me. I did not call anyone from the road. I stopped at a turnout near Carson and used a pay box to leave a time-stamped message with the office line. I said I had found sign that warranted more observation and that I would propose a plan to return. I kept it plain, I did not use the word. Back in the office, I filed what fit the forms and archived what didn't. The photographs and measurements went into a folder with location redacted to the level we use for sensitive nests. I spoke to one other biologist I trust, and I spoke with light discipline. She asked if I wanted to go back. I said yes, but not alone. Not because I was afraid, because the work needed a witness, because multiple observers reduce error, because a thing that stands up in front of you should be approached the way we approach any unknown organism. Steady, documented, and without chasing. I have not explained the engine. I have not explained the prints beyond what they measured. I have not explained the rearranged objects. I will not. I don't know why any of it happened. The dates, the times, and the distances are enough to carry the weight they carry. I still work the same forest. I still set cups on porch rails if a porch exists. I place tape where a step would drag it, and I write the time on a form and leave it visible. I keep my humor for missing windscreens and phone menus only. I leave the house lights alone. I park where I can see the truck. I have added one rule. If I hear an engine idle with no lights in the fog, I stay on the porch and stand still. I let it pass or stop or cut out, and I take one breath I can count. I will go back to that clearing before the year turns, with another set of eyes and a better plan for documentation. My ordinary work brought me to a new subject. The protocol hasn't changed. The focus has. I can hold both. The forest makes room. I end this as a note for the file. I observed a large bipedal creature covered in dark fur at close range in a remote Pacific Northwest forest, over multiple days and nights, with associated sign near my camp, an unexplained object movement. I experienced fear and a stronger scientific curiosity than I have felt in years. I intend to resume pursuit within ethical bounds. I was a broke commuter student cutting across the suburban park near the college to catch my bus. The paved path ran along a wide strip of woods the city let go wild. Bike lane paint flaked off the asphalt. The path bent around a small drainage basin, then rejoined the sidewalk on Maple. If I took it, I made the bus. If I didn't, I watched taillights. I wore one earbud. I had my mother's voice in my head about situational awareness, and once a semester I obeyed it. My nylon backpack had a broken zipper tab, so I looped a paperclip through it. The clip ticked against the pole with each step. I kept meaning to fix it. I also kept meaning to wash my dented water bottle. Small goals. Late afternoon slid into early evening. The light went flat. 2 joggers passed in opposite directions. A woman pushed a stroller on the far sidewalk. 2 high school kids shared a bench and pretended not to look at each other's phones. I was thinking about dinner and whether peanut butter could stretch one more night. I had a quiz tomorrow. I had an overdue library book. I had a to-do list and unwashed Tupperware. A squirrel streaked across the path and froze. I stepped over a split stick somewhere behind the tree line. A car door thumped in a driveway. I had no reason to be nervous. I was late. That was it. The sound started before I knew I'd heard it. Footsteps. Not on the path. Off to my right and a little behind, where grass gave up and leaf litter began. Heel and toe, measured and even, falling into my pace like it knew it. A small metallic jingle came with it. Not loud, controlled, like one key on a ring brushing a carabiner. I told myself maintenance or a neighbor cutting through. People take shortcuts. I stayed on the path and kept my line. The path curved toward the basin, bringing my shoulder closer to the trees. A jogger ghosted by in the bike lane and gave a half wave without slowing. I raised my hand and felt the air behind my right elbow go cool. The leaf bed rhythm matched my stride again. The jingle hit the turn a fraction late. I stopped. I didn't turn into the trees. I looked back down the path. No one had closed on me. The jogger was already far ahead. The stroller turned away at the cross street. The bench kids stayed folded over their screens. The footsteps stopped. The jingle stopped. Clean off. I stood long enough to make it strange. I listened. I heard ordinary park noise. I should have noticed first. A car rolling through the four-way at Maple. A bird calling from a branch. my water bottle knocking my thigh because I had a death grip on my bag strap. Leaves lay where they lay. The space between the trunks held nothing but thin shadow. I took one step. The leaf bed steps returned, half a beat behind, staying just off the asphalt. The jingle brushed metal in time. I stopped. It stopped. I stepped again. It followed. My skin pebbled. A person I could handle. A dog with a collar I could handle. I could even handle explaining why I held pepper spray. I palmed the can, thumb on the trigger guard. I didn't turn into the trees. Turning toward that sound felt like leaning past a railing. The basin opened on my left. On my right, trunk stood close along the line, and then fell back into greenish shade. The path was a boundary. I knew it in the same simple way you know a stove is hot. The sound lived a shoe's width inside the tree line, moving with me. I didn't know why. I didn't need why. Anger showed up under the fear. I had cut 5 minutes off my walk, and now I was paying for it. I stepped faster. The leaf steps quickened. The jingle sharpened. I looked left at the basin water and saw my reflection smear with my motion. Something shifted hard inside me. I wasn't just nervous. I was marked. I was under a tight, aggressive focus with no body attached to it. It pressed at the back of my neck. I broke into a run. My shoes slapped the path. The steps and the leaves sprinted with me. Still just off the asphalt, never touching the pavement. The jingle clicked once against something, then settled back into rhythm. My backpack swung and hit my spine. The paperclip rattled on the zipper. The park flattened into a line. Street lights began to blink on along Maple in a lagged sequence. I didn't look into the trees. I stared at the center seam of the path and the bright mouth of the sidewalk ahead. The border mattered. The paved line mattered. The rule had weight in my body. I kept to the asphalt because stepping into the grass meant stepping into the leaf bed and into whatever was matching me. If I tripped, I knew I'd give it what it wanted. I didn't have words beyond that. I didn't need them. A trash can at the bend jumped into my peripheral vision as a dark block. My breath hitched. I kept it under control because the bus stop was close and I couldn't afford to stall. The leaf bed rhythm held the same exact distance, like it didn't need to close the gap to do what it was doing. The jingle brushed metal on each footfall with a neat, small honesty. The path straightened and joined the sidewalk. The trees pulled back behind a chain-link fence. Grass ran to a city park signpost. The sidewalk on Maple was a newer gray than the worn blacktop. I crossed that seam. My soles hit concrete and the rhythm behind me cut off in one clean second. Not a fade. A stop. I didn't turn right away. I made the bus stop first. Plexiglass at my back. Route map at my shoulder. A painted post to hold with my free hand. I turned and looked back down the path. No one stood there. The fence marked the line. The trees held still. A plastic bag in the basin lifted and dropped. The jogger had looped far away. The air at the edge looked like air. The light looked like light. The sound that had matched me left nothing to point at. I kept the pepper spray in my palm. I watched the path until the bus arrived. I didn't film the tree line. I didn't pretend my phone could catch a noise that didn't exist anymore. I checked the bus number twice. I boarded, scanned my pass, and took the first seat. I watched the park slide away through the window until there were only houses. On the ride home, I made a list I didn't write down. I put "Don't cut the park alone" at the top. I put "Daylight or not at all" under it. I added "Call someone when you leave the library if you have to use it." I put "Replace the zipper pull" in a different column, because small fixes feel like control. The next day, I searched public posts about the park. Neighborhood watch. Dog groups. Lost and found. I scrolled for coyote sightings, break-ins, strange noises. I saw block party photos. I saw a complaint about litter. Someone had zip-tied a kid's glove to the fence by the bend and posted a picture with "found near the path." No one mentioned footsteps in the leaves. That didn't prove anything. It just sat there. That evening, I walked the long way on Maple. It added minutes. There was a crosswalk where cars stopped. There was a bakery window I could look into. The park lay across the street under a darker canopy. The path entrance cut a clean line into it. I kept my eyes on the sidewalk squares and counted cracks to the corner without saying the numbers out loud. A week later, I went back at noon with a friend who wanted to jog. He ran ahead and circled back while I walked. We stayed in the open. When we reached the bend by the basin, I kept to the center seam and let him pass. He asked if I wanted to take the inner path. I said no. He shrugged and kept running. He didn't hear anything. I didn't either. I don't know what waited in the leaves that afternoon. I don't know why the asphalt line mattered, but it mattered when it had to. That's the part I keep. The rest is a rule now. I cut the park only with someone else. I don't let my shoulder brush that edge. I stick to daylight. When I'm alone, I take maple without debate. When I pass the entrance, I look once at the seam where blacktop meets concrete, and then I put my eyes on the brighter sidewalk and keep moving. I live in a small 2-bedroom house on Old Mill Road, just off Main in Cedar Ridge, Kansas. It's the kind of place where the grocery store closes early, and the post office has one clerk who knows your last name. I moved back after my uncle died and left the place to the family. It made sense. I work from home, and my partner Aaron stays a few nights a week. The house is simple. Living room up front, a narrow hallway, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, no attic you can stand in. Just a crawl space and a pull-down ladder I avoid. The first odd thing happened the month after the funeral. I woke at night for no reason, and a figure stood at the foot of my bed. It was upright. My height, shoulders, a head, no features. A person shape with no person in it. I kept still and tried to turn it into the chair or the robe on the hook. The air had weight on my face. My throat was dry. I blinked. The figure did not move. I reached for my phone and brought up the flashlight. The screen lit and the shape was gone. The chair was a chair. The robe was a robe. I lay there and watched the ceiling. I didn't know why I had woken. I didn't know what I had seen. In the morning, I made coffee and blamed the blinds. They never sit right. I made a note to fix them, then forgot. I went to mail a form and stood in the passport line for 10 minutes before I noticed. The clerk pointed me to the next window without smiling, which felt fair. A week later, my friend Nate crashed on the couch after we watched a game. He eats half the chips and then folds the bag carefully, like he's helping a future stranger. Around 3, he started yelling in his sleep, not talking, yelling in hard bursts that snapped me up. I ran to the living room. He thrashed under the blanket. I shook his shoulder until he came back with a long, rough breath. He said he had been in the hallway and something stood by the bedroom door. He said it blocked him. He kept rubbing his forearms like they hurt, but there was nothing there. We didn't go back to bed. We sat at the kitchen table with the lights on and drank the coffee I had set up for morning. Dawn tipped in. He left early for a meeting in Topeka. We didn't say much after that. I changed the subject to the cost of tires, and he agreed too fast. He texted later that he wouldn't be staying over again for a while. I told Erin. She said we should get a carbon monoxide detector. We bought one and plugged it in. It stayed green. I also called the electric company because the hall light had started to buzz. The woman on the phone said an old fixture can do that. I wrote new fixture on a sticky note and pressed it to the fridge. It joined a list of other sticky notes there, all very patient. That month was heavy. Family moved in and out with boxes. Some left, some sat. My uncle's recliner made a dent in the carpet I stepped around like it was a hole. A stack of photo albums leaned against the bookcase. I bumped my shin on it twice in one day, and left it anyway. The house didn't feel angry. It felt unsettled, the way a room feels when furniture has been shifted, and your feet do not trust the path yet. Small things started to stack. A cabinet door I was sure I had closed stood open in the morning. The bedroom door swelled and stuck twice at night when it hadn't in dry weather. My sleep went light. I woke at the same hour and lay still with my eyes open, listening to the house. I told myself to cut back on caffeine. I told myself to get a better fan. About a month after Nate's night, it escalated. I woke in the dark. The room was still. I had closed the bedroom door before bed. I remember the click. The hallway light had been shining through, and I wanted a full dark. The knob turned. It did not jiggle, it turned. The door opened a palm's width with a small sound of wood and paint. No footsteps, no draft. The hall beyond was dim. I could see the edge of the bathroom door and the start of the rug where the hallway begins. My scalp prickled. The air on my cheeks felt colder. I kept still. I watched the top corner of the door frame. A dark mass hovered near the ceiling where the hall meets the bedroom. It had no outline. It looked like the corner held more night than it should. It stayed there high, still as if it were deciding. My chest tightened. My tongue pressed to the roof of my mouth. I lifted my hand toward the lamp and slowed it because I didn't want to move fast. The mass shifted left. It crossed the corner and thinned into the deeper shadow above the closet. I listened for the closet door. Nothing moved. I said my name in my head. I counted one breath and then another. I reached the lamp and turned it on. The corner was drywall, a hairline crack, and a dust web I always miss. I didn't sleep again. In the morning, I checked hinges and screws. I shot a short video of the door opening and closing to show Aaron. I set the phone in the hall and walked through twice to see if the lens would catch anything strange. It didn't. The video showed me in a door. After that, changes felt louder. The top dresser drawer dragged like it carried extra weight. The bathroom mirror fogged in a tight oval, even when the shower ran cool. I woke at the same hour for 3 nights. The back porch light flickered when I stood under it, and I stopped using that door after dark. Each thing by itself was ordinary. In a stack, it wasn't. Aaron stayed over on Friday. We kept the bedroom door open on purpose and put a nightlight in the hall. We told ourselves a little light would make it boring. We made a plan to ignore knocking or drifting doors and only act if something touched either of us. Sitting up with the lamp on, that felt reasonable. Sleep came in short runs. The house had its normal sounds: refrigerator, water heater, a truck on Old Mill. After midnight, Erin's breathing went shallow and fast. She said she was fine in a flat voice. Her body went stiff. I pulled the blanket back and held her forearm. Her muscles were locked hard. I sat up and looked at the doorway. The nightlight threw a low glow down the hall. The corners were steady. I watched and waited for that person shape to stand at the foot of the bed again. It didn't. The door stayed open. The air felt thick in the top corner. My breath sounded stuffed, like a head cold. Erin's breathing eased. Her skin warmed under my hand. I lowered the blanket and kept my hand where it was. Sleep took us for a bit. I woke when the house went quiet again. That deep stillness before the first car on Main. We had left the door open. It was fully closed. I got up and checked the latch. It had caught. I clicked it open. I clicked it closed. I ran a card along the strike plate and looked for fresh scrape marks. The metal was clean. I pressed my palm to the wood. It was cool. I didn't know why it had closed. The next week, I went to my sister's place in Wichita for 2 nights to help her set up a bookshelf. We did it. We used the wrong screws twice, and then the right ones. I slept hard. When I came back, the house was as I had left it. The sticky note stayed on the fridge. The hall light buzzed when it came on. I started a notebook in the kitchen drawer. I wrote down times when I woke, whether the door drifted, if the hall felt colder, if anything made a clear sound. The notes kept me honest. There were blank nights. There were normal nights. Then there were nights where something happened. It was the pattern that mattered, not one big thing. The last clear point came a month and a half after Nate's night. Weather was warm and dry. Aaron wasn't over. I woke and saw the figure at the foot of the bed. The same biped shape, same height. The room held more dark than usual, as if the air did not carry the small light from the street. I reached for my phone without breaking my stare. My fingers found the case. I pressed the side button. Before the screen lit, the door swung open and hit the stop with a clean flat knock. My body wanted to run. I kept it still. The figure held for one long breath and then thinned in the doorway and was gone. The hall was empty. The door rocked and settled. I stood up and went to the bathroom. I turned on the light. The light came on. I looked at my face in the mirror. My eyes were red at the corners. My jaw tightened when I tried to relax it. I took a blanket to the living room and let the TV run on low until dawn. Then I made coffee and left the closets alone. A neighbor's dog barked once and went quiet. The house took weight in the corners and kept it. After that, the house didn't soften. It didn't sharpen either. It held level. The pulse never went back to what it was before. My uncle died, and it didn't push forward to something I couldn't live with. It settled into its new shape and stayed there. I don't know why. I know the house took on more weight after we lost someone. Boxes sat, people came and went, the air kept the change. I still live here. I do not sleep with the door closed anymore. I put a small lamp on a timer in the hall that clicks on close to morning. I replaced the hallway fixture because the buzzing got into my head. I check the front lock twice at night and once more from the bedroom. When Nate comes by, he leaves early. Aaron stays, and we both watch the doorway without saying it out loud. I don't have an answer. I have a stack of small facts. A figure at the foot of the bed. A friend who yelled in his sleep. A door that opened when it shouldn't. A dark mass at the ceiling once. In the corner where the hall meets the room. Emotional shifts in the house lined up with the rise in all of it. And then one night pushed it into the open. I logged what I could and left the rest alone. I sleep most nights. When I wake, I look at the door and wait one beat before I breathe. Then I breathe. I get up, keep to the hall light, and touch the wall with my fingertips as I pass. Because the wall is always there and solid. I live in a single-wide outside Opelika, Alabama, off Lee Road 54, where the pines crowd the ditch and the rental office loses your mail unless you hand it to them. I say that because when you tell people you sense things, they want practical anchors. My keys hang on a hook beside the pantry door, under a sticky note that says pay water bill. I put the note there after the third late fee. The clerk at the utility window knows me by the way I grip the pen. I've felt people who aren't there since I was a kid. My mother called it being sensitive. I kept it quiet and did regular work. I do home inspections, crawl spaces, roof lines, outlet covers. I like checklists and switches that either flip or don't. Out in the field, I can keep the world in a straight line. At home, the line bends. When this started in earnest, I was in my 30s and sleeping in the back bedroom. The window looks south over a clay lot. The closet door slips out of its track. The hall door is hollow core and flexes if you press it. Those details matter because sound travels in a place like this. You know every bump and snap. You know your own footsteps. The first night it changed. I woke facing the wall. I wasn't paralyzed. I could move my hand and breathe. The red light on the surge protector was steady. The air felt heavier than the hall. Humidity inside the room. A weight under the sheet. I rolled on my back and saw a tall figure at the foot of the bed. It was a dark shape, taller than the door frame, without features. It didn't sway. It didn't lean. It stood there. I watched it. I counted silently because I didn't trust my voice. 10, then more. I lifted my phone. The screen lit the ceiling. The shape didn't change. The pressure eased. The figure was gone. I lay awake until a far train rattled the glass. You can say I dreamed with my eyes open. You can say it was a coat rack in bad light. I didn't own a coat rack. I had 2 laundry baskets and a wall hook with my keys and that water bill note. Nothing stood at the foot of the bed except carpet and the chair where I kept a shirt. 2 nights later, I woke and felt scratching on my upper arm. 3 quick passes. It didn't break skin. It didn't leave red lines. It was a precise physical sensation. Not itch. Not a bug. I turned on the lamp and looked for a mark. Nothing. I washed the sheets at 6 a.m. and stuffed the drum so full the machine walked sideways until it thumped the water heater, which I then had to wedge with a book. I put a notebook by the bed. Time up. Temperature reading from the cheap digital on the dresser. What I ate. If I had caffeine. When the neighbor's porch light clicked on, I wasn't hunting a spirit. I was making columns. I wanted a way to see it without staring straight at it. The scratching kept coming. Not every night. Enough to make me brace thigh, calf, a brush across the back of my neck that made me sit up fast. I changed detergent. I tried lotion. I set the fan higher. The night the figure came again, I had left the bathroom light on. It made a low rectangle under the door. The shape stood between that strip of light and my feet, taller than the frame, darker than the room. I said quiet but out loud that I saw it. Nothing answered. The pressure built. My chest worked harder to pull air. I sat up. The shape didn't move. Then the weight lifted, and the room was only a room. In the morning, my salt shaker was on the living room floor. It normally sits by the stove. I had not used it after dinner. I picked it up and set it back. My hands looked careful on it. Too careful. I told 2 people. My sister said I always had that thing with the dead. A guy at work, Marcus, said he got night terrors that felt like hands. I didn't argue. I took it in. I snapped a picture of my forearm after one of the scratches. It looked like skin. I deleted it. Before the first confirmed escalation, one more errand, the county office for tags. The line moved so slow, a man fell asleep in a chair. The clerk there knows me by my voice, because I always forget my proof of insurance on the first try. The escalation hit in July. I woke on my back and the figure wasn't at the foot of the bed, it was beside me. It loomed over the left side, a dense dark shape that cut off the weak window light. My body was awake. I moved my fingers, I looked straight up. The room pushed down. For a few seconds, no thoughts. Then one word. No. The word didn't change the weight. The fan on the dresser clicked where the guard is bent. I counted clicks without meaning to. After a stretch that had no number, the heaviness let go. The dark shape was gone. The fan kept clicking. After that, I understood the line had moved. It wasn't moving back by itself. 2 nights later, a different presence came. I didn't see her. I knew her. The room held steady the way it does when you stand in a doorway and someone you trust is behind you. Female. Older than me by a long reach. Patient. I don't know how I knew those things. I didn't hear a voice. I didn't get a name. I felt a calm that wasn't mine settle across my shoulders. I slept. When I say guardian, I mean that exact boundary. When she was present, the heavy air didn't come on. When she wasn't, I braced. From then on, some nights the dark figure came, and some nights the calm held the room. I stopped reading in bed. I cut coffee after noon. I set my phone to record sound. All I captured were light cycles and my own movement. I lined pennies along the dresser edge and found one under the bed in the morning. I don't know how it went off the dresser and rolled there. I pulled lint from the carpet and a bobby pin that wasn't mine. I started speaking aloud before sleep. I said, I live here. You don't. I need rest. If you can hear me, leave me alone. I kept the words plain and the same. One night the scratching caught my calf, higher on the bone. I swung my legs out of bed and stood. The figure was in the doorway, tall, dark, head bent forward so it blocked the hall light. I walked toward it. I didn't have a better idea. Waiting had not worked. I kept my palm up. A calm came in from the closet corner like a front of cool air. It touched the room. The figure didn't turn. The dark lost weight, and the doorway was a doorway again. I said no. This time the word held. I stood in the hall, and the trailer stayed still. I adjusted the space. I cleared the chair at the foot of the bed. I kept the hall light off. I moved the bed 2 feet to the right so the window wasn't centered over my feet. I put a small wooden box on the dresser and said out loud that nothing in the room was allowed to move unless I moved it. If a thing was on the floor in the morning, I set it back and repeated the rule. It wasn't poetry. It was a line I could stand on. Over months, the scratches came less often. When they did, they were brief and shallow. The figure showed up fewer nights and stayed at the far end of the room. The female presence kept to the left corner near the closet. When she was there, the dark didn't enter. I didn't know why. I wrote down the pattern and treated it like a system. One night, the bathroom light was on when I lay down. It was off when I woke. The switch was down. The breaker box outside showed all toggles straight. The bulb worked when I flipped the switch. I logged it and left the reason column empty. I kept living. I worked. I crawled under houses and took pictures of joists. I paid the water bill on time more often. I moved the keys hook to the side of the fridge because my hand found it faster there. The salt stayed by the stove. The notebook by the bed filled up. Then another. Years pushed through. The woman stayed. I didn't see her the way I saw the shape. I knew the room was steady at night by how my breath sat clean in my chest. I folded shirts and the closet corner had a weight that wasn't furniture. When I woke to heavy air, I sat up and said no, and I don't consent to this. Then I lay back down and waited 1 minute by feel, not count, for my breath to even out. If the heaviness didn't lift, I stood and walked to the doorway. I held the space, it worked. I didn't drive anything out. I confronted it without panic and stuck to the rules that let me sleep. I don't know what any of it is. I know what it does. When I was passive, it crowded close. When I set terms, it backed off. I don't put names on it. I don't claim more than that. The night it leaned near, and the calm rose from the closet corner. I felt the two forces press against a line I could hold, and I held it. My home feels like mine now. The figure still returns some years, and the woman is still there when it does. I follow the same steps. I keep the rule about the doorway. I don't invite or challenge. I hold my ground and sleep. I moved into the second floor flat on Walnut Street because the rent was clean and the windows faced south. The house used to belong to a painter named Ellis Hodge. People in town still called it the Hodge House. The listing mentioned the history like a polite warning, the same way a man might mention an old noise in the pipes and keep smiling. The first week I kept a folding table in the living room and propped a lamp on a stack of mail. I took photos of every room before I unpacked my books. I do this with any place I rent. Document the starting line so I know what belongs to me. The bedroom was a narrow box with a built-in cupboard, a crooked picture rail, and floorboards that clicked at the edges when I walked. I liked it. I like art, and I like knowing who made a space before me, even when the knowing makes people uneasy. I had the Hodge catalog on my kitchen counter, one of those thin paperbacks from a local show. His colors sat in the gray range. He painted his house. He painted faces that looked like they were waiting to be told what to do. One page showed a small boy in a hallway, nightshirt, bare legs. That image sat in my head while I hunted for the right screwdriver. My first utility errand ate half a morning because the gas company wanted an account number in the packet, which did not exist. I stood on the sidewalk on Walnut with my phone to my ear and said please 3 times, which did nothing but made me sound like a stuck form letter. The woman on the line corrected my zip code and put me on hold. A bus rolled past carrying a baseball ad, and I remembered my bed was still in pieces on the floor. That night, I slept on the mattress with no frame. The room had the smell of dry wood and old paint. The window lock didn't catch, so I wedged a pencil in the track. I told myself I'd buy a proper stick and cut it to size. I checked the door latch twice. I made a note to replace the lost screwdriver. I run an audio app while I sleep. It costs nothing and it gives me a record. If you say a thing happened, it helps to have something that tells you what the room was doing. Once it flagged a radiator ping as speech. I kept the clip anyway, because I like a file I can point at. I turned out the lamp. The ceiling went soft and gray. The house carried a quiet under the fan noise. In the morning, nothing to report. On the second night, I woke with a cool patch across my chest and checked the window. The pencil was still wedged. The frame squeaked when I touched it. A dry, ordinary sound. I told myself to stop making notes on minor problems and fix the lock. The third night, I had the bed frame assembled. Corners squared to the baseboard. Catalog face down on the floor. I killed the lamp. The quiet settled in the way old houses get quiet when they have no reason to be anything else. Something entered the room. No latch clicked. No hinge moved. The door stood where I left it closed. The air shifted as if someone had walked past me without touching my shirt. I knew it before I understood it. The space changed shape. I opened my eyes and saw a small figure at the foot of the bed. Not mist, not shadow. A solid boy in a nightshirt with bare legs. The top of the mattress would have hit him mid-stomach. I did not breathe. I held my hands flat on the sheet and watched. He had not come through the door. He didn't make a floorboard complain. He stood, then climbed onto the bed. The mattress dipped with his weight. My body slid half an inch toward him. A joint in the frame made a small wood pop. Pressure crossed my legs and hips. The sheet tightened over my knees. I leaned in, the fan noise kept running, but it didn't cover him. His mouth came close to my ear. He whispered a sentence. The words made sense in order and still landed wrong. It was an invitation. It told me where to go and when and what to say when I got there. Each piece fit, like we had agreed to it earlier, which we hadn't. I lay still. Motion felt like a bad plan that would change what was happening into something I couldn't manage. I stared at the thin gray strip under the door and counted nothing. A thought rose and settled. I know your face. The catalog nudged at me from the floor. The boy's face had the stillness of paint. It was too exact. He looked like the child in Hodge's hallway. He slid back. The weight eased an inch. The mattress rose slow, the way a cushion does after a hand lifts. Then the pressure was gone. He didn't step off. He was in the room, and then he wasn't. The air held the shape he had made, and then even that left. I kept my eyes open until the fan app looped and cut for a second. When it did, the night went blank, then returned. I turned on the lamp. The room was just a room. The catalog lay face down. I didn't pick it up. At 7, I stood and put on socks. My hands shook and made the heel fold wrong. That stupid fold made me angry in a way that had nothing to do with socks. I made coffee. When the sun hit the wall, I opened the catalog. The hallway page was there. The boy stared at nothing. Nightshirt, bare legs, the same mild, forgettable face. I took a phone photo of the bed. It was a normal picture of a normal bed. The sheet had a crease I couldn't read. Not evidence. I pressed my hand on the mattress where it had dipped. Nothing felt different. I recorded a short clip on the voice app. I said the time and the room and the words third night. I kept my voice flat. At lunch, I pulled up the local museum's page. The Hodge show had ended, but the press release was still up. It said he lived in the house at 412 Walnut and painted interiors and family subjects. It mentioned an unnamed sitter, a child from the household. 4 works, no name, no relation, no outcome. After work, I went to the main library on Arc and asked for city directories. The reference librarian in the Ask Me Anything lanyard showed me the shelf. In the 1931 directory, Hodge was listed at my address. In the 1933 one too. The librarian asked if I wanted newspapers. I read a column about an open house and a photo of Hodge in a suit with his wife. No child listed. The house looked younger and cleaner. That was it. I went home before dark. I left the lamp on too long and turned it off. Because if I intended to see, bad idea. If I intended to sleep, worse. I lay down. The fan ran. Waiting made the room feel tight. He came again and did not touch the floor. There was no entry sound. And then the weight was on the mattress near my feet. The shift pulled the sheet tight. My calves rose. He climbed the bed. The frame gave its small sound. He leaned in again. The whisper was the same, with one change. He shaved a word down and moved the time earlier. He made the place so specific that an address popped into my head that I didn't know existed. My mouth went dry. I said no. It came out air. He didn't wait for my answer. He delivered the line like it was a task, and when it was done, he left. The mattress eased. The room returned to itself. I didn't sleep. I got up at first light and walked to the corner of Walnut and 3rd. The crosswalk signal ticked through its cycle for no one. A man carried a ladder on his shoulder and didn't look at me. I went to a diner on Market and ordered coffee and eggs, because my hands needed something to do. I kept both palms flat on the table to see they were steady. When I got back, I carried the catalog into the hall and matched the painting to the real sight lines. The stair rail in the painting had a nick. My rail had a notch in the same place. The floorboards in the painting had a darker strip down the center from feet. My hall had it too. The boy in the image stood with one foot turned in. I set my foot that way and put it back because I didn't want to stand inside a posture from a painting. I called the landlord. I asked about house history. He said the roof was new last year, and the disclosures were in the lease. He told me to submit a work order for the window lock. He had a practical tone. I said thanks, and didn't mention a boy who did not use doors. The next night, I moved a little desk lamp to the floor in the bedroom and set my phone on the nightstand with the voice app open. I placed the catalog face down in the living room. I lay on my side, facing the wall. I closed my eyes when my eyelids made me. When he came, the bed dipped deeper. The wood complaint came from a different joint. He leaned in. The words matched the second night. I smelled clean cloth that hadn't seen outside air in a long time. His breath made a small pressure change near my ear that I felt more than heard. I said a name. I didn't have one. I took a guess and said Ellis. It landed and went nowhere. The boy did not react. He held himself like he had been set in place. It was the stillness that I could not stand. I reached with my left hand toward the weight and brushed the front of a nightshirt. The fabric had a flat weave and a straight seam. It returned no heat. My hand jerked back. The mattress undipped a finger's width and settled. He didn't leave because I touched him. He left because he had delivered the line. I sat up and turned on the lamp. The paint on the wall looked uneven in the new light. I checked the app. The track was a long gray bar with no flag speech. I hit play anyway. Fan noise. A small wood pop. Fan noise. No whisper. No breath. I stared at my own breathing pattern in my chest and hated it. Morning came with a garbage truck and steady traffic. I read the lease packet again. No mention of any child or any incident. I printed the hallway page from the catalog and taped it to the inside of the cupboard door behind the mugs. I didn't want to see the face daily, but I needed to know where the eyes were when I reached for coffee. I wrote on the copy second night earlier time. For a week I made rules. I locked the bedroom door, even though the lock would not stop anyone determined. I kept the pencil in the window track even after I cut a proper stick. I stopped reading the catalog after dinner. I silenced notifications and set the voice app to record. I slid the bed 2 inches left, so the frame wouldn't sit where it sat before. It didn't matter. The bed dipped where he climbed. He whispered the same line. He left. I wrote the sentence down and tore it into 4 pieces and threw them away in different bins, because I didn't want to carry the phrasing in one place. On Saturday, I went to the small art center on 5th. A volunteer asked if I needed help. I asked about Hodge. She said some pieces had gone back to a family. She said the house sometimes did holiday tours. I said I lived there. She smiled at my face like she wasn't sure if that was good. She said she didn't like his kid paintings. She said they made her whisper without thinking. I told her I understood and left. That night I set the bed frame on a rug pad to change the contact points. At midnight, a joint clicked anyway. The weight came, the line came. My body held still, because that was the only rule that didn't make anything worse. The words went through me and stuck to nothing. I haven't answered him. That is the limit I keep. I don't go where he says, and I don't say what he wants at the time he says. I accept that he will arrive and deliver his one sentence, and that my phone will record the wrong parts. I keep the lock turned. I keep the window wedged. I keep the catalog shut at night. I sleep. I wake. I note the way the bed moves and whether the frame makes one sound or two. I live in the Hodge house. I pay rent on the first. I cook in a small kitchen where the cupboard hides a photocopy of a hallway that matches mine. Some nights the mattress dips and a light body presses the sheet and a quiet voice gives me a place and a time in the dark. I don't know why. I make coffee in the morning and check the pencil in the window track. I keep my rule and let the day set the time. I was 17 and killing time at my friend Ben's house in Aurora while his dad finished a work call. October light sat on the street. A mower buzzed a block over. His place is a split level near East Mississippi Avenue. Front door, small entry. Stairs up to the bedrooms on the right. We dropped our backpacks and opened sodas. Ben said the upstairs was off limits because his dad was replacing some trim. That sounded like a dad rule. I respected dad rules because they cost less than mistakes. His Wi-Fi had a new password. He said his dad changed it for security, which is what dads say when they forget their own passwords. I nodded like that helped. We were about 10 minutes into a video when footsteps moved through the house. They came from the front hall, heel to toe. Carpet muffled the edges, but the weight carried. These were not soft shoes. This was a boot sound with a steady roll. Not the random clicks you get from a house settling. The steps passed the kitchen and angled toward the stairs behind the living room. I paused the TV. We both listened without moving. The steps climbed. One, then the next, slow and heavy, up to the top landing. I pictured the hall that turns right toward the bedrooms and left toward a small sitting area. The steps stopped at that turn. No door, no drawer, no voice. Dad. Then called normal household volume. No answer. We waited. The house went still. Ben said his dad must have come in from the garage side door. It was the easiest explanation, so we used it. I hit play again. 10 seconds later, the steps moved again, now above us. They traveled the upstairs hall, past the bathroom, past his dad's room, into the guest room at the far end. They stopped there.
"Did he text you?" I said.
Then checked no messages. He sent a quick "Where are you?" We waited another minute. No reply. I walked to the bottom of the stairs and stood on the last step without going up. Air drifted down cooler than the living room. Cut wood smell rode it from the trim work. There was also that dry, closed-up smell from rooms that don't get opened. Dan joined me. We listened to nothing. He said his dad probably didn't want us up there. That matched the rule. We backed away. The steps started again. They came out of the guest room with the same weight and crossed the hall to the top of the stairs. They stopped right at the point where a person would have to turn and descend to be seen from where we stood. The sound cut in a way that made the hair on my neck lift. No shift, no tap, just there, and then not moving. I said we should check the doors. We did a loop downstairs. Front door closed and locked. Garage empty, door down, side door latched. The only thing on a counter that hadn't been there a moment ago was a tape measure near the sink. I tapped it and left it where it was. It didn't prove anything, it just gave me an excuse to keep my hands busy. Above us, the walk-in crossed the small square sitting area at the center of the hall and entered his dad's room. You could hear the difference at the threshold, how the weight hit a firmer subfloor near the doorway. Same boots, same pace, heavier strike on that line. I didn't know why, I just heard it. I told Ben to call his dad. He did. It rang, then rolled to voicemail. He left a message. "Are you home? Please call." His voice wobbled near the end. I didn't point it out. The steps left his dad's room and paced the hall again. They kept tight to the outside edge where the runner ends. A hinge moved at the far end. A door eased open and settled against its stop. None of the upstairs doors in that house opened by themselves. Standard latch knobs all the way down the line. You have to turn them. We went back to the bottom step. Sitting felt wrong. Standing felt worse. The upstairs didn't move. The fridge fan kicked on. A truck rolled along Mississippi. In the top hall, the air went quiet in a focused way, like a held breath. Then the boots carried back toward the stairs. They stopped hard at that same spot. One more step and we would have seen a leg come into the stairwell. The movement ceased the instant it would have crossed into our sight. Not a pause, a refusal. The upstairs held the line. Ben whispered, "Do you hear it breathing?" His eyes wet. I listened. No breath, no fabric, no human small sounds. The cut wood smell was stronger. I checked the upstairs sightline again. The office door stood open a few inches. It had been shut when we arrived. We hadn't touched it. I marked that fact and let it sit. I said we should step outside. Ben said his dad would be mad if we left the house unlocked. I said we could lock it behind us and text him. We took 2 steps backward toward the entry. The boots resumed the moment we moved. They withdrew from the stairmouth and walked the back rooms. It wasn't random. It was a confident route, like someone who knew the layout and didn't need to feel for the walls. The sound tracked the bedrooms, the window room, the little square space at the center, and then back. We opened the front door. Warm air pushed in. I stepped onto the concrete stoop and kept my hand on the knob. Ben turned the deadbolt, then unlocked it to pull the door open farther. We stood with a foot on either side of the threshold and watched the top of the stairs. A hinge clicked above us. A door eased to fully open and met its stop. One clean thump. The boots crossed to the window room and stopped. The next sound was nothing. We stepped out and shut the door. Ben locked it. He checked the handle twice. We stayed by the stoop and looked up at the second floor windows. The blinds on the office were open a sliver now. Earlier, they were tight. I didn't take a picture. I didn't need another reason to go back inside. Ben's phone rang. His dad asked what happened. Ben kept it simple. Heavy footsteps upstairs. Doors that should have been closed were open. We left because we didn't want to get in the way. His dad told us to wait outside. He said he was on the way and might call a neighbor. We waited. The sun dropped and porch lights on the block flicked on. No sound came from the house. When Ben's dad pulled up, he waved and went in the front door alone. We heard him walk up the stairs and down the hall. Hinges moved, doors opened and shut. He came down and said he didn't see anyone. He said he had left the office door open himself. He said boots on carpet can sound like delivery trucks if you aren't used to it. I knew what we heard. I didn't argue. He told us we could come in. We did, but we stayed on the lower level. We unpaused the video and turned the volume up. We used the downstairs bathroom. We left before full dark. Ben texted later that he slept on the couch. I didn't blame him. I went back twice in the next month. Both times in daylight. We stayed downstairs. If we needed something from a bedroom, we found a reason it could wait. I kept my shoes on. It wasn't bravado, it was a rule I wrote for myself at the bottom of those stairs. If upstairs asked for me with heavy steps and doors I didn't open, I keep clear space between us. I don't call out. I don't go looking. I step outside and hold the line. I don't know why it stops right before I would see it. I just know that it does. And that's enough to keep me on the lower floor and near a door. I bought the townhouse because I was tired of wasting my weekends in traffic on Walnut Street, and I wanted my daughter to have a room with a door that closed. It was a simple 2-story in a quiet row in Cary, North Carolina. 2 dogs that sleep better than I do. A mortgage that made me pack lunches. I was a project manager who kept a calendar on my phone and the budget in my head. I thought I knew what ran my house. I was the kind of person who labeled cables and still lost the label maker twice in one weekend. The first weeks were all boxes and errands, and introducing the dogs to the new stairs. The living area sat beneath the main bedroom. A short hallway from the front door opened into the living room and the small dining area. The kitchen ran along one wall. The couch faced the TV. I kept the game controller on a charging station on the console table because I needed one surface that looked organized. The HOA portal needed 6 password resets to accept a payment, which is how I learned they used 2 different login systems. We were not special neighbors. I waved at the same 2 cars each morning. The bedroom had one small window that faced a narrow strip of grass and a fence. Streetlight glow came through the blinds and made a faint line across the closet doors. Our daughter's room was at the top of the stairs, down the hall from ours. The dog slept on a bed by our door. If my partner Ellie had to be up early, she put her clothes in the bathroom the night before. We kept the house quiet after 9. On my first hardware store run, I bought the wrong anchors and realized it after drilling 2 clean holes I could not call decorative. The first odd thing was sound. It came at night and it came from directly above the bed, which meant the ceiling. A scratch. Not a scamper. Not a squeak. A scratch that started and stopped as if something tested the sheetrock. It woke me, because the line of the sound sat exactly where my head lay. I turned on my side and it stopped. I looked at the clock and it was past 2. The dogs lifted their heads but did not bark. When I turned off the lamp, the scratch started again. It went on for a minute and then quit. I stared up at the vent and the smoke detector. I didn't see anything move. In the morning, I stood on a chair and pushed the attic hatch in the hallway to see if anything had chewed the edges. I saw insulation and dark space and nothing else. I put the hatch back and wiped my hands on my shirt. I did not say anything to Ellie, because we both had work and school drop-off, and I wanted to tell myself it was branches or a bird. There was not a tree close enough to touch the roof. I told myself sound carried funny in these units. I didn't know why I told myself that, except that it was useful for getting out the door on time. The second night, the scratch came again, and this time the dogs stood. They faced the ceiling. Their ears were forward and their bodies were stiff. The sound was slow like a nail against wood, and then a pause, and then again. I spoke the dogs' names and told them to lie down. They did not. The scratch moved from the center of the ceiling toward the wall behind the headboard. It stopped when I sat up. I touched the wall. The paint felt cool. Nothing else happened. Eventually, I lay back down and watched the line of light slide along the closet doors until the street light shut off on its timer. I put in a maintenance request with the property manager who handled issues for our row. He wrote back that pest control would check the crawl space and attic during the next service loop. A man in a polo came by while I was at work and left a form. It said he found no droppings, no chew patterns, and no access points at roofline. He set a couple of snap traps in the crawl space for precaution. I kept the form in a kitchen drawer. The scratch came and went over the next weeks. Not every night. Enough to change how I slept. When it came, the dogs woke and stared up. When it didn't, I woke anyway and waited. I ran voice memos on my phone one night and left it on my nightstand. The next day, the recording had the sound of the heater, a long interval of quiet, then a run of scratching from somewhere above us, and then my own breathing. There were no voices. I listened in the car during lunch and put the phone face down on the passenger seat when it ended. The first time something moved, it was the controller. I walked into the living room after work and found the charging cable hanging off the side of the console table. The dock was in place. The controller was 6 feet away on the floor, facing the couch. The battery light was dead. The cord had come clean out of the port. There were no kids over. The dogs don't jump on that table. The table did not wobble, and the dock sat on a rubber pad. I picked up the controller and looked for a crack. There wasn't one. The port felt tight when I fit it back in, and the charger light came on. I put the controller in a drawer and said we would charge it there. The drawer stuck on the old track. I pressed it shut until it caught. That night, the scratch started and did not stop. It went for a long time. I looked at the ceiling and counted the beats between runs. The dogs stood again and faced the point over our bed. They were quiet. Ellie pulled the blanket up and turned to me and asked if I heard it too. I said yes. We lay there and watched the line of light across the closet doors. When the scratch stopped, it stopped all at once. The quiet after it ended was worse. The next week, Ellie woke me hard by saying my name. She sat up and put her hand on my chest. I sat and got half turned before I saw what she saw, which is to say I did not see it. I turned on the lamp. The light showed the closet doors, the dresser, the open bathroom door, and the corner where the hamper sat. The dogs were up and rigid. Their eyes were on the spot where Ellie had pointed. Neither dog growled, but they did not take their eyes away. We stayed like that a long minute, and then I turned the lamp off. I waited for my eyes to adjust to the dark. I didn't see a figure, and I didn't see movement. I did not know why my skin felt tight. I lay back down and did not sleep. Ellie didn't either. Neither of us said anything else. In the morning, she told me again what she had seen. She said it wasn't a reflection. She said she watched it breathe, only it didn't lift like a chest. The edge of it changed. She said it had a human shape and stood on my side as if waiting for me to wake. I listened and watched the dogs follow me from room to room. After that night, I kept the lamp on until the streetlight shut off. We moved the bed 6 inches away from the wall. It didn't help, and I did not expect it to. The scratch came back 2 nights later and ran in that same slow way, and then quit. It always quit. The gap after it stopped made me hold my breath. Our daughter came into our room the next week while I was putting laundry on the bed. She stood near the doorway and looked at the corner by the dresser. She asked me who the baby was. I told her there was no baby. She pointed at the corner and said there was a crying baby over there. I looked. It was the same corner Ellie had pointed at in the dark. I asked my daughter what the baby sounded like. She said the baby was quiet now. She walked over to the dogs and patted one head, and then asked if she could have a snack. I said yes and followed her to the kitchen. I told myself she was trying out new words from daycare. That night, I stood in the doorway of our room. I looked at the corner. I did not think there was a baby there. I did not know why she used that word. The dogs lay with their heads pointed the same direction, and their bodies on the diagonal as if they had to keep the door and the corner in view at the same time. I left the lamp on, and sat at the end of the bed and waited. I did not say anything out loud. I replaced the smoke detector and the batteries in the carbon monoxide monitor because it was something I could do. I took the charging station off the console table and put it in a box in the hall closet. The controller stayed in the drawer. The next day, while our daughter was at a friend's house, I stood on the chair again and opened the attic hatch. I put my phone in video mode and raised it above the edge and panned. When I brought it down and watched it, I saw insulation, a beam, and the top of the hallway light. No movement. Dust near the lens. I closed the hatch and put the chair away. I told the property manager that the scratching continued. He emailed back that the traps in the crawl space were empty and they would schedule another pass in 2 weeks. I did not push him. I didn't know what I wanted him to do. If I had put words to it, I would have asked him to stand in my room in the dark and listen, and then tell me he heard nothing, and then tell me it was fine to live there. We kept going. Work, school, groceries at Harris Teeter on Tryon Road. The dogs learned the rhythm of the mail truck. Some nights were calm. Some nights the scratch ran and stopped. Twice more, when the house was quiet and the room had that weak light from the street, Ellie lifted onto one elbow and watched the corner and told me, after it passed, that it had been there again. She said she didn't want to wake me each time. I told her to wake me. When she did, I never saw it. I never saw it head on. I started waking hard at small sounds, like the heater relay clicking on. We made small rules. The controller stayed in the drawer. The dogs slept in our room with the door open to the hallway. We kept a nightlight on in the hall so it threw a soft bar of light across the doorway and into the carpet. We didn't talk in bed once the lights were out. We left the corner alone. We told our daughter that night was for sleeping, and we did not entertain questions in the doorway after bedtime unless she felt sick. She accepted the rule. She still mentioned the baby once when I was brushing my teeth, and I told her we had no babies here and that she was safe. She nodded and asked for a step stool for the sink. One night in late spring, the scratching ran harder than usual and then stopped. The dogs looked up, then down as if following a path I could not see. I sat up and let my feet touch the floor. I watched the corner. I did not blink on purpose. I kept still until my spine ached. Nothing moved. The lamp stayed off. Ellie lay on her side and did not speak. We both stayed like that until the streetlight shut off, and the closet doors went dark. When I finally lay back, my pillow felt unfamiliar. In the morning, the drawer with the controller had slid open by an inch. We still live there. I keep a folded blanket on the foot of the bed, because it keeps me from letting my feet hang over. The controller stays in the drawer, and the charging station stays in the closet. I keep the dog's bed where they chose it, in that line between the door and the corner. I don't stand in that corner in the dark. I walk around it when I put laundry away. I don't know why that helps me sleep, but it does. I don't know why any of this began. I don't know why it hasn't stopped. I watch the line of light on the closet doors at night and wait for it to move. I go to work in the morning and pay the mortgage and make breakfast. When the house is quiet, I listen. When I hear nothing, I listen anyway. The old treatment center sat 2 blocks off Colfax in Denver, the kind of place with deep window wells and a basement that always ran a little cold. I went there most afternoons because they let students use the art room if we signed in. A counselor named Sharon kept a clipboard at the front desk, and a jar of pens that never had caps. I liked the basement studio because the pipes hissed just enough to drown out chatter and nobody checked on you unless you set something on fire. I painted, finished homework, and let the noise settle me. My companion that day was Nate. He was another student who used the space for film projects. We called it a collaboration, but mostly he paced around with a camera on a strap, and I worked on a poster design for a campus magazine. It was early evening, a gray day after class, with that flat light that makes every hallway look the same. We signed in at 4:10. Sharon wrote our names wrong again, and I corrected mine because I wanted the hours to count. She said the upstairs was closed for floor repairs. I nodded like I had any intention of going upstairs. The basement had 2 long rooms and a corridor that dead-ended at a locked metal door. The ceiling was low, and the fixtures buzzed in a steady way. The cinder block walls were painted. The tables were scarred from 100 utility knife mishaps. I set out my sketchbook and a coffee I shouldn't have bought. The vending machine on the first floor takes dollar bills but not dignity, and it gives nothing back. We got comfortable. Nate lined up 3 little LED panels and pretended the HVAC was ambient sound design. I tried 2 fonts and hated both. We heard footsteps upstairs at one point, and figured a staff member had cut through despite the sign. After the first hour, my fingers finally loosened. I did a clean block for the title, and snapped a photo for my file because I'm a nerd about version control. The building felt empty in the good way. No slamming doors, no laughter through vents. Just hum and pencil and the occasional clack of Nate adjusting a tripod leg. Around 5, I took a break to stretch. I walked the corridor to the locked door, and back to put the unwind into my legs. The air had that cold cement smell. The fluorescence flickered once, a normal blink. When I got back to the table, my phone buzzed with a calendar reminder I didn't need. I swiped it away. I sent a text to my cousin Maria to confirm Sunday dinner. She was the default family glue since my aunt got sick. Whenever my phone tells me to breathe, I imagine invoicing it for unsolicited advice. We heard the sound then. It came from above us, from the unlit upstairs. Not feet, not a TV. Whispers. The kind you can't pick apart. A low mouth right at your ear and still out of reach. It carried down through the vents in the old wood. Under it, a soft crying. A person crying. Not a pipe squeal. A steady, ragged intake and a wet hitch, like someone holding back and failing. I looked at Nate. He tilted his head toward the ceiling. We listened long enough for it to move from odd to wrong. The upstairs was supposed to be closed. The lights up there were off. The stairwell by the basement door sat in a rectangle of dark. I told him I would check with Sharon. He nodded and turned off one of the LED panels. He said he would wait. He thought it might be a client stuck in a hallway. He said it like he was trying to make it normal. I wanted a normal reason too. I picked up my phone and walked to the base of the stairs. The stairwell was empty. The motion sensor did not trigger. The light stayed dead. The building held the sound like it was caught in the wood. Whispers, crying, no words. The temperature dropped in the stairwell. The door seal at the top was probably bad, I told myself. I stood on the bottom step and said hello. My voice sounded flat. Nothing answered from the dark. I said I would get staff and came back down. I walked the hall to the front desk. The basement had 2 turns and a ramp. My steps echoed under the buzz. Sharon was not there. A note on the clipboard read, "Upstairs closed back in 10. Her pen lay with the cap off. The lobby clock said 5:17. The whispers did not follow me to the desk. The radiator made the air warm by the window. I pulled out my phone to call the front office number anyway. I never dial the extension right on the first try, even when I write it on my hand. I went back. The first escalation waited in the dark at the top of the stairs. I didn't know why it showed then. I only know what I saw and what I heard. The whispers rose. The crying sharpened. It came down through the stairwell like a warning. Nate stood in the corridor halfway between the art room and the stairs. His LED panels were off. His camera hung slack in his hands. He looked past me, up into the unlit space. A figure stood on the landing. It occupied the spot where the light should have been, but no switch clicked and no bulb woke. The shape had shoulders and a head, and the bare outline of a body, transparent enough that I could make out the banister through it. Something ran down its face, not shadow, a substance, thin and steady, like water or gel. It tracked from the sockets to the jaw on both sides. It screamed. There was no build. It hit full volume at once and struck my chest hard. The sound had no words. It burned my ears and cleared every extra thought. I grabbed the rail and braced. Nate pressed back against the wall. The scream stopped. The figure vanished. 1 second it stood there, the next it didn't. The air stayed cold in the stairwell, but the sound was gone. We didn't talk. We stood in the basement corridor and looked up into the black. The whispering didn't return. The crying didn't return. The building slid back to the hum of fixtures and the hiss in the pipes. I could hear my breath too loud. Nate lowered his camera and asked if I had gotten anything on my phone. I checked my pocket. I hadn't recorded a thing. He said we should leave. I said yes. We gathered our things in 3 motions. I put my sketchbook in my bag and left my pen uncapped. He slung the camera and left the cables coiled where they fell. We did not go up the stairs. We took the long way to the rear exit that opened to the side lot. The lock stuck once and then gave daylight. Still hung in the west, thin and low. The air outside felt clean. We didn't talk in the lot. I called Sharon from the sidewalk to tell her the upstairs might have someone in it. She picked up and said she'd been in the staff kitchen and had not seen anyone go up. She told me they had locked the upstairs at noon for a contractor. She said she would check with maintenance and asked us to send a quick email so she could log it. I sent the email while I waited for my bus. I used plain words, sounds from upstairs, figure on the landing, raised voices. We left. The bus came. I sat with my bag on my lap and my phone face down. My chest still felt tight from the scream. My ears hummed the way they do after a loud show. I thought about the substance on the face and told myself it was water. I watched storefronts slide by. The sun dropped behind a low bank of cloud. I went home and washed my hands. I didn't touch my sketchbook. I ate standing up and opened a book I could not track for more than a page. At 7:42, my uncle called. He never calls me. He asked if I was alone and told me Maria had collapsed in her apartment half an hour earlier. He was at the hospital, the doctors were working. He said he would call me back. I stood in my kitchen with the lights on and the fan still running because I had left a pan on low. I turned it off. I sat on the floor. At 8:23, he called again. He said she was gone. He told me her heart had stopped. I could hear the rest of the family moving behind him. People we love who find things to carry because their hands won't stay empty. He asked if I wanted someone to pick me up. I told him no because there was nothing I could do at the hospital. We hung up. I stayed where I was and listened to the building. My neighbor's dog barked once and quit. A car alarm tested its horn 3 times and gave up. I didn't know why the upstairs gave me whispers and a scream and a face with something running from the eyes. I only knew what followed. I thought about the time on Sharon's note. I thought about our sign-in. I thought about the space between the scream and the call, and then I stopped. I turned off the kitchen light and lay on my side and watched the dull red of the clock. The next day, I went back to the center to pick up the cable Nate left, and to tell Sharon again, because filing it felt like ballast. She had already sent my email to maintenance. The upstairs was still closed. No incident reports on her side. She handed me the cable and asked if I was okay. I said I was fine because that is what you say in a public lobby. I walked down to the basement. The art room looked like it always did. The lights were steady. The air felt the same. The stairs were only stairs. I stood at the bottom step and looked up. No whispering, no crying, just the hum and a faint wash of traffic from Colfax. I left without sitting down to work. When we gathered for Maria, the family set out the usual food and told quick stories that left out the parts we didn't know how to say. I didn't tell anyone about the basement or the scream. It would not bring her back. It would not help anyone sleep. Later, Nate and I checked our phones to see if either of us had caught any audio by accident. We hadn't. I had the email to Sharon, and the times of the calls. He had a still frame of a black stairwell and a smear that could have been a leftover reflection from his LED panel. We saved them and put the devices away. We didn't go back to work in the basement after 5. I still use the center during the day. I still sign the clipboard and fix my name when someone writes it wrong. I still like the hum. I leave before the light drops. When the edges of the building go soft, I pack up and go. That is the rule I keep now. I don't wait for the motion sensor to wake. I don't stand at the bottom of the stairs to listen. I leave the upstairs to its dark, and I leave my day before it gets there. We were halfway through a midday showing when I saw the man in the blackened suit standing outside the living room window. He stood square to the glass on the new lawn, tall and dark like he'd been pulled from a fire and left to cool. He didn't move, his head angled enough that I could make out the flat plane of his face, but not the features. I kept my hands on the curtain like that would help me see better. The broker chirped about builders and warranties. My husband Mark checked the pantry door because he checks every hinge in every house. Our son Eli clapped at the echo in the empty rooms. I said I needed a minute and stayed by the window. I handle small weirdness well. I'm the one who knows where the receipts are and which neighbor owns the white truck that idles early. I keep a drawer of 9 volts for the smoke detectors. It doesn't make me special, it makes me useful, which is how I sleep, out back. New sod ran to the tray line. The brochures called it a small forest. It was a thin stand of old oaks with a shallow swale that could swallow a bike. The man stood where the grass met leaves. The light moved in the trees. He didn't. I stepped to the kitchen island and texted my father-in-law, Al. He grew up off this highway and can tell you who owned which lot by the brand of the broken tractor left there. He answers fast and complains about autocorrect like it's personal. The broker slid a glossy info sheet toward me and said we could lock a rate. I nodded and set the paper down. My phone buzzed. 3 messages from Al came in out of order, then made sense. Don't buy near the old airstrip. They scraped a crash site out there in the 70s plane. Broke up on approach. They hauled the big pieces. Not all. Ask if your lot is on new fill. I went back to the window. My reflection crowded the glass. The man was broad in the shoulders, bigger than Mark. His clothes were wrecked by heat. No smoke, no flame, just char that still held the shape of cloth. His hands hung loose. The left wrist turned down a little. He didn't look at me. He didn't look away. I watched for a breath, and then the next one. The kitchen clock clicked. Nothing else did. Back deck. The broker called. Sure, Mark said. I kept a fingertip hooked under the curtain rod bracket. The rod was loose in the drywall. Another note for the drawer. My phone buzzed again. Al had added the street name and asked for the builder. I sent it. My thumb shook once, then steadied. That steadiness felt like a decision forming. We walked the deck. The boards were new and sticky with sap. Mark leaned on the rail and judged hardware. The broker talked about HOA rules. I thought about Al's line, not all, and let it sit. The HOA app sends out warnings for grass length, so they'll love residual air disaster history, I thought, and kept that inside my head. The trash pickup day matters to me more than it probably should. I always remember it too late and drag the can out in a robe at night. 2 houses down. A corner lot sat staged and empty with no blinds. The broker said it had a different plan, slightly bigger. Vacant means clean lines to the glass. From there, I could get a second angle on the same tray line. If I saw the man again, that would be 2 points. If I didn't, I could say glare and go on with my life. We wrapped the tour and crossed the street. The broker fumbled the lockbox and blamed the app. She said it updates every week and breaks every Tuesday. It's impressive how reliably a system can fail on schedule. Inside, the air held fake lemon from a plug-in behind a side table. The living room window framed the trees. No curtains, no reflection. Fresh mulch in a bed below the glass. Tire ruts from a landscape crew. Eli wanted up, so I lifted him. He put his arms around my neck and hummed the way toddlers hum when they are charging up to either laugh or cry. His breath dampened my collar. A black crow hit the outside of that window with a flat crack that traveled into my forearms. It slammed the glass and slid down, leaving a streak. It dropped to the flower bed and flapped once, then went still. Before I could move, a second crow swept out of the trees and hammered the same pane. Another dull crack. It fell beside the first bird, wing shuddering, then folded in. I didn't know why. I stepped back. Eli did not scream on the first hit or the second. He screamed on the third. The third crow struck. Eli's body went rigid. He pushed away from me with both hands and aimed toward the door, like outside was safer than inside. He screamed before we crossed the living room line. He had been quiet the entire day. He screamed now, high and full, and the sound emptied him. I turned and carried him out. The broker's eyes met mine, then cut to the window. She looked like she wanted me to say what I saw first. Birds, I said. We'll wait on the porch. She nodded. Mark went to the window alone and leaned in, then stopped himself from touching the glass. He backed away and came out to us. He set his hands on his hips the way he does when he's telling his hands to do nothing else. He is decent under pressure. He doesn't waste moves. All called. He doesn't like to type the important parts. He said there was a crash out there decades back. Cargo. He didn't remember the airline. He said they sealed ground and moved fill, and spring floods turned into a retention basin line under the new cul-de-sacs. He asked if there were trees left. I said yes. He said the neighborhood would sell out fine, but there were lots. He would not pick. He said if I saw anything strange near the trees, we could look inland. He didn't ask me to explain the strange part. He knows me. He trusts what I report. I looked down the street toward the original house. The back windows faced the oaks. The man in the blackened suit was gone. The grass lay smooth. A bird in the bed below the staged window dragged a wing in a low circle and stopped. The broker said she would file a note about a window strike and call the staging company for cleanup. She said it in a careful tone. She had seen the birds. She didn't need to say more. We thanked her and asked to see a different section. Mark drove. Eli fell asleep in his seat fast, cheeks streaked with dried tears. The road followed the same tree line for a block, then bent left past a storm drain and a fire hydrant. The sky was clear and washed out. We drove under it like both the past and the new paint would hold. For a minute, they did. At the next model, the backyard opened to a retention pond with reeds, and a metal grate angled toward the water line. No trees. Open sight lines to a fence and then more houses. Sound carried clean. Mallards muttering. Wind over grass, one distant leaf blower. No flat cracks against glass. Nothing stood where a person shouldn't be. I'll text it again. Your Aunt Marie remembers an approach from the south. Heavy smoke. They carried on. Pick a house with open rear yards. Love you, I told Mark. He nodded once. He trusts me, even if he doesn't always say it. He said we could skip the other side of the street. He didn't add a smile or a shrug. He didn't need to. I didn't go back to look through the first window. I knew what I had seen. A large, charred man stood outside without moving. A family member confirmed a fatal incident near that spot. Crows hit and fell against another unoccupied house's window. My child screamed before we stepped fully inside. Those are the facts. The rest is me making decisions around them. We left before the afternoon tours stacked up. The broker texted 2 addresses that backed to streets instead of trees. I replied we'd schedule next week. I meant it. I also meant we would not set foot on the lots that touch the oaks. I don't need to say it out loud to make it a rule. I can keep a boundary with a map and a pen. That night, after Eli went down, I opened the builder's site plan. A faint blue line marked the old stream bed that ran under the new cul-de-sacs. I traced it and set an X on the lots that touched it. I didn't save the file. I don't need a record on a hard drive. I just need to remember where not to go. The next morning, I called the broker and asked for interior lots with open rear yards and no tray line. I kept my voice even. I didn't outline the window or the birds or the man. I didn't want my account to turn into a nervous laugh on speakerphone. This isn't a ghost story to me. It's a list of conditions I can avoid. We will buy a house. It will be fine. It will not back a thin stand of oaks on new fill. It will not sit on ground that lines up with an approach and a break, and pieces lifted into trucks. I don't know why the crows hit that glass or why Eli screamed when he did. I know what I saw, and I know what Al told me, and I know some places hold what happened to them no matter what you stack on top. When we drive past that development now, we take the inner road that runs by the pond. We don't turn down the street that brushes the tray line. We don't need to. I note the trash day for the new blocks. I keep spare curtain rod anchors in a bag, and I let the trees keep their line. Boundary kept. My family's house in Naperville was quiet in the way suburban houses get after dinner. The streetlights on West Jefferson clicked on. The cul-de-sac settled. Our attic was unfinished and always empty. That never mattered. At night, it had a schedule. Most evenings, while the TV murmured and my parents cleaned up, the footsteps started above us. Slow and even, they crossed the attic front to back and stopped, like someone pacing to think. My dad called it old wood cooling. My mom said the roof shifted. The steps didn't care what we called them. They came whether we were listening or not. I learned to study with headphones because of it. I learned which boards in the hall squeaked and which didn't. I learned that a house can have two different nights, the one you see and the one that runs on its own. The first time I saw the figure was in late fall. My boyfriend and I had broken up in his car in front of the high school. It was loud and not private. I cried in the bathroom at the public library and used the hand dryer to get my sleeves dry enough to pass as fine. By the time I got home, my eyes were raw and I had a headache behind my teeth. I went straight to my room, shut the door, and hit the switch for the overhead light. It was a simple fixture. 2 cords split from a central mount and ran down to a pair of shades. The glass wasn't fancy. It showed everything. The cords were swinging. Not a little drift from air. They moved like someone had given them a good push and let go. The arcs matched, back and forth, tight. The light flickered around the edges because the bulbs were old. I stood under it and watched them cut the same path. I checked the window. It was closed. The vent was closed. My room had 1 door. The hallway was still. I didn't open the door or call for anyone. I waited. The cords kept going. After a while, the swing lost height and then slid into that lazy drift a room has when you breathe on it. I didn't tell my parents that night. I didn't want advice. I wanted the house to act normal. The attic paced at 9 that night, and again at 10. It turned at the far end of the rafters and came back. The steps didn't match wind. They didn't match the furnace. They matched a person who had a path and a reason. I am not dramatic by nature. I'm a daughter who gets good grades and loads the dishwasher without being asked. I put leftover containers into each other in a way that would pass a health inspection. I also cried again 2 weeks later alone in my room because the college email I wanted didn't come. I shut the door, I clicked the light, the cords swung hard. They didn't swing when my sister slammed the bathroom door after a fight with a friend. They didn't swing when my brother lost his JV game and threw his shoes in the garage and left them there. It wasn't random. It was me and my head on fire. I didn't know why. I kept a lid on it for a while. I took walks around the block and used my backpack straps like reins. One night, I sat in the car with the radio on and let the heater run until my dad tapped the window and told me to come inside because the exhaust would drift into the house if I kept it up. And my mom liked her lungs unsinged. I threw out 2 winter formal tickets because I didn't like the idea of standing under a gym ceiling that big. My mom thought I had senioritis. My dad thought I had too many AP classes stacked like a bad game of Jenga. I made a joke about the school counselor's appointment system that puts you on a 6-week wait list and then emails you a confirmation that your 6 weeks have started. It sounded like a threat and a promise at once. I didn't feel any better. The footsteps never changed. They didn't speed up, and they didn't stop when relatives visited or the kitchen got painted. I could be brushing my teeth and hear them above that thin square of ceiling in the hall. They ran while I swished and spit. I knew the distance between the turns because the house held it and repeated it for me. I brought a phone into it. That was my attempt to document, the ordinary kind. The next time the cord swung, I set my phone on my desk, camera pointed up. I tried to keep my breathing out of the mic. The video caught the arcs. It caught me standing there with my shoulders tight. It caught the light stuttering at the far edge, and the way the shadow line on the ceiling cut a different angle each pass. The audio got the attic when the steps started. You can hear the rhythm and the turn. We don't have anyone in the attic. We have steps. I showed my sister. She watched and said I probably exhaled at the wrong angle and gave the cords a push. She said the attic sound might be the neighbors building a deck, which made no sense because the noise came from overhead, and the neighbors didn't build a deck every night. She handed the phone back without making eye contact. She didn't want to own it. I told my mom I was getting migraines. She told me to keep a log. She uses logs for everything. Miles on the car. The coffee filter we use again if it's not torn. The porch bulb that burns out every other month. She got a spiral notebook from the junk drawer and wrote headaches on the top and the date. Then she left it on my nightstand like a coaster. The attic paced at 9, like it was punching a clock. The notebook sat under the lamp and took on that faint curl paper gets in a dry room. I didn't write in it. The second time I saw the figure, the day had no big shape. I made dinner because my parents were late coming home and my siblings don't think vegetables are real. I cut chicken and burned one piece and ate it myself, because the others watch like that means anything. I put the lid on the pan and wiped the counter until it squeaked. After cleanup, I went to my room to finish a lab write-up I had pushed off. The house had that Sunday night sound that isn't a sound. It's the absence of the weekend voice. I clicked the light. The cords moved. They didn't start from nothing this time. They were already going. In the far corner where the two walls meet by the closet, a figure stood. It fit the corner the way a shadow fits a wall. It had the outline of a person who is not trying to be seen but is still there. I looked straight at it. I saw a body-shaped absence, darker than the corner, present enough to name. It did not come closer. It did not raise a hand. It stood where the walls make a hard stop and waited. I backed out of the room. I kept my eyes on the corner and hit the switch by feel. The light went off. The hallway bulb took over. I stood with my hand on the doorframe. The attic took its slow route and turned. I slept on the couch that night and told my brother we were doing a movie marathon, which turned into both of us passing out before the 10-minute mark, with the preview menu clicking the same 3 notes on repeat. My dad told me to move my homework in the morning because he needed the coffee table clear. I moved it. I didn't tell him anything else. The figure didn't show up when the cords swung in front of other people. That is the best I can offer for proof beyond the video. My sister had the flu and slept in my room for a night while her sheets washed. She cried at 2 in the morning in that quiet way you learn if you share a wall. The cords were still. The attic did its route on time. I heard it. She didn't. She breathed through her mouth and said the room was stuffy. She recovered and moved back down the hall and asked if she could borrow a skirt I wouldn't miss. She didn't ask about the light. I stopped using that overhead. I used a lamp on my desk and a small clip light that came in a set. The cords don't swing if the switch stays off. You can solve a lot of problems by not touching a thing. When application season ended, and the answer staggered in, I had one night where the house felt like it was holding itself level so I wouldn't tip. I got a small scholarship and an acceptance that mattered to me. Not because of anything you can write on a yard sign, but because of a list of courses that made sense. My mom hugged me hard at the sink. My dad lifted the box of old tax returns and set it back down for no reason. He does that when he's happy and out of dishes. My siblings clapped in the living room like it was a bad skit. I went to my room to be alone with it in a clean way. I shut the door. I reached for the switch. I stopped. I kept the lamp on and sat with the good news in a quiet pool of light and let the ceiling be a ceiling and not a device. The house kept its schedule. The attic walked. I didn't know why. There were other nights. One in late spring after a fight with my mom about curfew. One when my brother got in trouble for smoking behind the bus garage and I took that on like it was mine to carry. One when my ex posted a photo from a party and tagged people like we were cards. You could lay down and count. The cords swung those nights. The figure stood those nights. It never crossed the room. It never did anything else. I moved through the day, knowing the night would be the same. Light outside, dinner, homework, attic steps. Choose a lamp. Choose breath. Choose what to say. The choices were small and real and took effort to keep. On a Sunday in early summer, I took everything off the shelf in my closet and dusted. I took the covers off the shades on the overhead fixture and wiped them with a damp cloth. The metal was warm from the last time I'd used it, and fine dust lifted and made my nose prickle. I put everything back where it had been. I didn't promise anything to the room. I didn't ask for anything. I stood there with the switch under my finger and didn't press it. That was a decision I could make and keep. My sister borrowed the skirt. My brother made it through the season and apologized in the lazy way that passes for a start. My parents kept the house the way people keep houses when they have jobs, and mouths to feed and 2 cars that need oil changes on opposite weeks. The attic kept walking. The cords kept still unless I was the one shaking inside, and the corner kept its depth. I copied the video to a cheap flash drive and put it in a folder with a few school papers. It doesn't prove anything to anyone who needs more than what I have. It's enough for me to say this. The house had a constant voice overhead, and a separate thing that answered me when I broke. Now when I come home for a weekend, I sleep in my room with the lamp on, and the overhead switch untouched. If I am mad or sad in a way that pulls the air tight, I walk once around the block and let my chest settle before I go in. The attic still keeps time. I hear it when I brush my teeth and when the ice maker dumps. The corner is the corner. The cords hang without motion. I don't know why any of it happens. I don't ask the house to explain itself. I keep my hand off that switch. I learned young that a building can make you uneasy for no good reason. My dad's place still does that to me. He ran a wholesale supply business out by the old industrial park, near the deadline locals still call the River Spur. The spur is a rusted straight shot into a thicket and an earth berm where the county piled fill. It ends. I watch on late afternoons when the lot went quiet and the forklift propane smell hung low. We parked nose to nose with the chain link and watched the wind push junk across the asphalt. Dad's accountant used the word cash flow like he was trying to make it float. If you've stood in the Broad Street Dunkin' line at 4:45 p.m. in July, you know true civic endurance. That day, the heat was past its high, but still laying over the concrete. The sky was flat. My mom drove me to pick up a set of keys because Dad had locked himself out of the upstairs office. He called me twice, he called her once. We pulled in by the loading dock. The lot is long and rectangular, bordered by fence, and then the defunct track. The building is a 2-story brick block with glass that always looks dirtier than it is. Every time I walk inside, my stomach sets like I'm about to give a book report. They say small businesses are the backbone of America. I saw a lot of spines go out carrying shrink-wrapped pallets of copy paper. I had the keys in a zip pouch with a sticky note. Blue tag for upstairs, red for vestibule, green for the restroom nobody wants to use. Mom stayed in the car with the engine off to save gas. She propped the door with her foot and fanned herself with junk mail. She told me not to dawdle. I have never not dawdled when instructed, but I put in a good faith effort. I walked around the back bay to the office entrance, climbed the narrow stairs that flex, and let myself in. The upstairs office smelled like toner and warm dust. I took Dad's spare set from the bottom desk drawer. Under last year's calendar, I locked back up. 5 minutes. I pushed out into the light and heard a sound across the lot that made me stop with the door half open. A high metal ring and a steady engine tone. Not a truck, not our forklift, not HVAC, not any of the noises I had mapped to this place. I moved to the edge of the shadow and looked beyond the fence. The track sits 10 or 12 feet out from the fence and runs straight. Leaves crack through the ties. The rails wear a coat of rust. A posted county notice from years back says the spur is closed. It lists a long number nobody calls. There was a vehicle on the track. I write vehicle because I still don't want to write train. It was bright blue, glossy, clean color like someone had polished it that morning. Not one of those little maintenance carts you see online. This had car height and a curved nose with older edges, square windows, clear glass. Sunlight cut across the interior, and I could see people inside. They wore clothes that matched each other and didn't match anything I've seen on Camden workdays. Dark jackets with a narrow cut, white shirts with close collars, a hat brim at a low angle, hair set in firm lines. The driver, if that's what he was, had his hand up like he was checking a watch or rubbing his temple. The blue engine rolled along the dead track like it had right of way. Slow enough to feel deliberate, fast enough to be leaving. No clatter, no vibration through the ground, just that bell tone, and then even that faded. I stood there with the keys biting my palm and watched it pass the boundary of the lot and keep going. And then I remembered the dirt wall. The river spur faces a berm at the east end, not a slope you could ride over by mistake, a physical end. I have walked it. When I was 8, Dad lifted me so I could see the long pile of dump fill and old mattresses and rebar. He told me the railroad pulled their switch and left the stub to rust. He told me nothing that big was coming down this line again. I stepped to the fence. The chain links cut my vision into diamonds. The blue engine went past the corner of our lot, continuing toward the bend where the spur used to feed the main line. There is no connection anymore. The rails dead end into the earth. I know that. My mom knows that. Everyone who drives River Road knows that. Do you see that? I asked. My voice sounded normal. It could have been a grocery question. She turned in the seat, eyes half shut from the brightness, then squinted at the fence. She followed my line like she was reading a caption and finding the photo late. She stepped out, one foot on hot concrete, one still in the car where the air was cooler. She shaded her eyes. "What is that?" she said. We watched together for several seconds. I did not count. The glass sliced the afternoon. A man inside turned his head and swept his eyes past us like we were scenery. The bell tone stopped. The blue engine kept moving toward where the rail disappears into dirt. My hand went to my back pocket. I thought about my phone. If I looked down, I would lose it. I kept my eyes on the track. I didn't know why that felt like a rule, but it did. At the bend, it didn't slow. It didn't stop. It moved along a line I've seen end in a heap of waste and weed. Then it entered a section of air that should have been dirt. I did not see dirt move. I did not see metal cut soil. It just continued where nothing connects. My breath went shallow and then returned in a hard pull. I stood still to keep from shaking the image out of place. When it cleared the bend, we couldn't see it from our angle. The sound didn't echo back. The wind pushed a paper plate across the asphalt. A dog barked on the next block. A truck with a loose belt squealed upriver. I waited for ground shake. Nothing. My mom said my name. We got back in the car. The seats were hot. The keys in my hand were warm from skin. We turned the engine over and sat with the AC blowing a full minute, watching the fence and the track. The berm was a berm. The dead rail was a dead rail. The blue was gone. "Call your father," she said. She kept her eyes on the fence. I called. He didn't pick up. He never picks up on the first call when he's counting the drawer. I left a message. I didn't know how to explain. I said we had the keys. I said we were leaving them under the visor. Mom put the car in drive, then in park. She got out without closing the door and walked to the fence. She held a twist in the wire, then let it go. She drew sight lines with her handrail, bend, berm like she was tracing a map. She is the one who told me when I was small that the track was dead. She looked at where it ended and where, for a minute, it hadn't ended. She accepted both. I felt like we'd stepped into a sentence without a period and had to walk back out. At home, she called her sister who worked 30 years in county transportation and treats signals and maintenance like family gossip. Mom described the spur and asked if any equipment had come through this season. She didn't mention color or clothing. She framed it like an administrative check. Her sister laughed at the idea. The river spur has no switch and no schedule. The line ends in physical fill. If anything came down, it would stop hard in a pile of mattresses and tires, and she would have heard when the yard crew called to complain. She told Mom to tell Dad to stop walking back there, because he steps in things and tracks them into the office. Mom nodded into the phone and thanked her. She ended the call. Neither of us said the word train. That night, I lay in bed and watched the window go from orange to gray. The building on River showed up behind my eyelids, the way it always does before I fall asleep. Warm dust and old coffee filters, the echo when the door bangs, chair wheels that leave black commas on vinyl, the lot, the fence, the dead track. I didn't dream about it. I woke up with the same town and the same errands waiting. I drove to Broad Street for coffee because Dad still wanted coffee, and because doing what you always do gives you something to hold. I stood in line. A person in a reflective vest argued about a coupon. I got 2 iced coffees and a bag of napkins. Someone else would throw away. On the way, I took River for a look without stopping. The fence was a tired line. The track went nowhere. The berm sat in the heat with a crushed sofa on its slope. The county notice had peeled corners. I parked in the same spot. The lot did what lots do. I walked up the same stairs and opened the same office door. I put the spare keys back under last year's calendar. At the top of the stairs, I paused at the narrow window that faces the track. I held the sill with both hands. The view framed one short stretch of rust and weed, and a line of light on steel. No blue, no people in matched jackets and close collars. Heat wiggled distance. A bird landed and hopped across ties. I stood there until my legs tightened, then went down and did what I came to do. After, in the car, Mom and I talked about payroll and the upstairs AC, and the person who parks crooked. We put the day back in its grooves. We didn't mention the word until we were almost home. Did we see a train? She asked. She said it careful, like the word might act on us. We saw something on the track, I said. That was the line I could say. It was true. She rode the wind with her hand like she does when she's thinking. That line is closed, she said. It ends. I've walked it. I know, I said. We have photos of me on that berm with a popsicle and grass rash on my cheeks. I know what ends look like when you're standing on them. By dinner, I had phrases ready for anyone who asked how my day went. None included the color blue. None included hats, collars, or the bell tone that cut the heat and then stopped. If I said the tone out loud, I would start listening for it under other noises in the office. Him in the vent, so I didn't. We didn't tell Dad that night. There was nothing he could do with it but set it beside vendor catalogs. I didn't post. I didn't text someone who would send a link about heat mirages on tracks. I didn't want a name. I wanted the image to sit by itself and be what it was. Since then, I don't park at the back fence late in the day. I use the side door and cut through packing, where the light comes from skylights and not the long flat sky that turns the lot into a stage. I drop keys, I unlock, I relock, I drive away. There is a building on River that often makes me uneasy. I thought I knew why. Now I don't. The last time I stood by the fence and looked down the deadline, there was a soda can on the rail, dented in the middle. I looked at that dent for a long time, until my eyes watered, then walked back to the car. The first night in the new house, I woke up already standing. My feet were cold on the hardwood. The hallway was darker than the bedroom. The refrigerator motor hummed downstairs. The heater clicked, then stopped. I stood with my hand on the doorframe and listened to nothing I could use. I used to tell people I could sleep through anything. I used to say activity was drafts, bad wiring, and a brain chasing patterns. For work, I write help docs and step lists. The world makes sense when you click in the right order. We needed a third bedroom, so we clicked fast. Denver punished hesitation and rewarded speed. Old wood trim south of Colfax, a little window over the stairs. We bought it in a week. I told my wife Kay that an asynchronous closing was fine and stuck a sticky note on the dash that said keys. At move-in, the key stuck in the deadbolt and my son's suitcase toppled off the entry bench. I said perfect, haunted lock, and earned a look. When the garbage company had me on hold for 40 minutes, I said this is the part where you prove you truly want trash to the empty room. The kids grabbed drawers. The house took us in without comment. We put our bed under the south window in the primary. I liked the outlet there. Kay took the side near the door so she could reach the bathroom fast. The window was painted shut. The latch was loose. We fell asleep to soft tires on asphalt and a bus on Broadway drifting by. I opened my eyes around 2 or 3 and saw the question, why are my feet cold? I watched the hall for a beat and went back to bed. The next night, I woke halfway to the living room. My right heel was on hardwood and my left was still on the bedroom rug. The staircase light from the street lamp drew a slant on the wall. My weight leaned forward. Kay came up behind me and touched my elbow with 2 fingers. I turned and walked back with her. We didn't say much. The kids slept through. Nothing in the house was out of place in the morning, except the shape of my thoughts. On the 3rd night, she stepped in front of me. I had made it to the threshold. She set her palm on my chest and held her other hand out like she was guiding a car. Stop, she said. I said I was, but my body wasn't. She reached back without turning and bumped the door with her wrist. The light click of wood meeting wood cut through me. I stepped back. We stood there and woke all the way up. Do you remember getting up? She said. No. Okay. It kept happening. On quiet nights, I woke standing at the threshold or leaning toward it. Sometimes I had my hand on the wall. I never reached the front door. I always stopped within the reach of Kay's voice or her hand. In the morning, I read about sleepwalking on my phone with the brightness low. Articles said stress, medication, family history. I had a move. I had a prescription that hadn't changed in years. No one in my family walked in their sleep. The list said to put away sharp things and add a gate at the stairs. I typed baby gate into a note, then deleted it. I told myself I must have been getting water. It sounded thin even in my head. By the 5th night, Kay lay on her side facing me and held her breathing too steady to be asleep. I faced her and tried to pretend. At 2, I stood again. She stood quicker. She caught my forearm near the elbow, turned me, and lay across me like a belt. I stayed. Shame is a small hot thing that doesn't help you do anything. We have kids, we get up when alarms tell us to. None of that mattered at 2 in the morning in the dark, with my feet on the floor. In daylight, I made one more joke for myself about migrating and hydration, then put jokes away. That night, movement turned into a rule. I woke up, brushed Kay's shoulder with my palm like I was about to ask her for something, and she said no. The word was a regular volume. My body obeyed. In the morning, she said we were moving the bed. Where? I said. Not here. We dragged the frame to the north wall while the kids ate toast. The primary had one outlet there. I plugged in the lamp and tested the switch. The view out the window changed from the neighbor's floor to our roof line. My son asked if we were redecorating. I said yes. My daughter asked if it would look funny. I said it would look fine. That night, I woke up inside the bed and stayed there. I woke with the light gray at the curtains, and the room in the same shape it had been when we turned off the lamp. The house felt normal in the morning. I packed lunches. I told a coworker the new office was comfortable and muted, and looked at the door for one long second. We kept the bed on the north side 2 more nights. Rain ticked once and quit by morning. The heater clunked on its schedule. Kay slept. I watched her sleep because she had been holding the line for days, and quiet looked like relief. On the 3rd quiet night, a friend from work, Lucy, texted and asked how the place was going. I sent back weird week. She said she knew someone who did readings. I typed we're good. Thanks. Then stared at the wall and the door. I sent, actually, can I have her number, and felt the tile I stood on shift. I don't like psychics. I think grief makes easy marks. That was the story I told about who I was. Moving the bed had worked, and it left me without a better story. Her name was Mara. She came on a Sunday afternoon. Thin clouds. The kids were at the neighbor's playing Uno. She wore jeans and a canvas jacket with a stain near the pocket, like she'd brushed against something in a garage. She took off her shoes by the door. Her voice was normal. I don't need your story, she said. Walk me through. We walked her through. She moved slow, pausing at corners, holding her hand near frames without touching them. In the primary, she looked at the south window, then the north wall, then stood in the hall and set herself in the frame without crossing. The room held still. Her eyes went to the floor where the bed legs had sat the first week. Drag marks made a small shine there. There, she said, that's where it feels wrong. What does that mean? I said. She didn't give a speech. She said a woman had died here in the past, right about there by the south window. She tapped near the baseboard with her toe but didn't step in. She said it wasn't violent. It was sudden. She said the house held a pattern from that spot to the hall. She said if you are thin with sleep, you can catch it like a current. She kept her words plain and short. Kay said thank you. I asked if it stops if the bed is on the north wall. It can, she said. You already know that. It hit me in a way I didn't want. I stood in the doorway and watched her walk out. She touched the banister once. At the front door, she said to keep the bed where it was, sleep with the door shut and the curtains closed for a while, and make the line firm. Then she left. I stood in the hall alone. Kay texted Lucy to say thanks. The house sounded like a Sunday. The air had a damp edge from the earlier rain. The light had dropped 1 notch. I looked at the south window and said we won't sleep there in a regular tone. I wasn't performing. I was setting a rule I could follow. We kept the bed on the north wall. I shut the door at night. I latched it. Though it didn't need the latch, I closed the south curtains. I didn't stand in the doorway unless I had to. The kids slept with their doors cracked and a hall light on. They didn't know the shape of what we were managing. They only knew the room was different and we were keeping it that way. A friend asked if we'd move the desk into the primary. I said no. In the week after, I checked county records. The database is built for tax parcels, not stories. But names tell you enough. A woman with one of the past deeds had an estate sale. No cause on that page. I found an obituary that matched her name and this address. It didn't say where she was standing when it happened. I printed it and put it in the drawer with the takeout menus because I didn't have a better place for it. I haven't sleepwalked since we moved the bed. Sometimes I wake and feel a lean in my body, a slow forward pull. I say no in my head and keep still. It's not a fight, it's a correction. Kay sleeps again. Before we fall asleep, she puts her hand on my chest for a second, a quiet check. I keep my phone on the nightstand and loop the charger cable behind it so it won't fall, and make a sound in the dark. I don't know why the south side pulls. I don't know why the north side doesn't. I don't know if a sudden death in a room can leave a groove that a tired brain rolls into. I don't know why the first week put me on my feet. The old explanations don't fit clean. I'm not forcing them to. We set a line, and we keep it. I shut the door at night and open it in the morning. I sleep on the north side and wake up there. I don't pause in the threshold in the dark. I don't lean toward that window. I don't need a reason.